across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome to Morning Glory. It is, of course, Wednesday. It is coming up to 3 minutes past 6, and we are right on it here at Talk, because Morning Glory is the home of common sense. We are the home of common sense, and I have to tell you, there is an awful lot of madness going on at the moment. To wit, let me just give you a small sample of the stories we're going to bring you this morning, right? The Daily Telegraph starts with the page one story of the court, an immigration judge. I mean, these people are going more and more insane, giving Gazans the right to settle in the UK, basically saying the Home Office have said that they can be treated in the same way that Ukrainians were, so that there's a family of 6 seeking to flee Gaza. They've been allowed to join their brother in Britain after an immigration judge ruled the Home Office's rejection of their application breached their human rights. So I think we've got, what, how many, 2 million people, is it, living in Gaza? Something like that. So if they don't fancy living there, they're a bit worried about the coming onslaught from the Israeli Defence Forces because of the fact that Hamas are now refusing to release any more hostages. They can all just come and live in Hounslow, or perhaps come and live in, I don't know, Leeds, or a suburb of Manchester, maybe Scotland. I mean, this is absolutely and utterly ridiculous, isn't it? We don't want people from Hamas coming here. We don't want Palestinians coming to this country and setting up terrorist cells. I don't think that is exactly where we should be going. You know, there will be people, no doubt, bleeding heart liberals going, oh, but they've had such a terrible time. They've been removed from their homes. Now Donald Trump's trying to turn their homeland into a Riviera for millionaires. Well, yeah, and they're now calling it from the Riviera to the sea, aren't they? But the point is this. We do not have any room anymore in this country to put any more people up. Thank you very much indeed. So can we just get a big sign, or maybe a fence, like Donald Trump's got in America, and just says no entry? What we don't need is more immigration judges being completely and utterly feckless and completely and utterly disregarding our human rights. What about our human rights? Do we have any? Thank you very much indeed. Meanwhile, the Chagos Islands deal, it turns out one of the judges in that case, who was at the International Criminal Court, came out and basically decided that we should give the Chagos Islands back. She's from China. Right? Not only is she from China, but she's a member of the Chinese Communist Party. China, of course, is going to be a massive beneficiary of anything that happens in the Chagos Islands if they get given back to Mauritius. And that's why David Lammy is dancing to the tune of the Chinese Communist Party. Absolutely and utterly unbelievable. Wes Streeting, meanwhile, is backing the health minister who says you can identify as a llama. You've got Lord Hermer, as he likes to be known, backing a fraudster lawyer who's basically disbarred and disgraced, trying to sue the British government because of things that he accused British troops of doing which they didn't do. I mean, just unbelievable stuff. Also, the right to die law seems to have died on its feet, because Kim Ledbetter, the woman who is putting it through the House of Commons, the MP who is the sister of Joe Cox, has completely and utterly disregarded what she said were going to be the safeguards, and she's basically gone, nah, we're not doing that. And meanwhile, children as young as 8 are getting hip operations because they're too fat. And in The Sun, we've got Father Ted. You know that show, very funny show. There's a trigger warning apparently been put on it. And the headline, and I'll be able to say this because we've been trying to get, you know, one slightly risque word into the show. First on Monday it was bollocks. Yesterday it was cock. Today, what the feck is what it says in The Sun. And yeah, it is ridiculous, isn't it? Theo Asherwood is here. Theo, very good morning to you.
Very good morning to you, mate.
There's a lot of madness going on today. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. And so, I suppose we start with the Daily Telegraph, don't we?
Yes.
And Gazans given the right to settle in the United Kingdom. You know,
yes.
As if we haven't got enough problems.
Yes, and this is a family, the Telegraph is saying here. It's a mother, a father, 4 children aged 7 to 18. They had their home destroyed in an airstrike and were living in a Gaza refugee camp. And they've now successfully applied using the Ukrainian refugee scheme.
I mean,
which the Ukrainian scheme from January 2024, they filled it in January 24, and now they've been given the right to come to this country. And the Home Office is saying, this is the Home Office that, of course, set up the scheme when the Conservatives were in government, warning it could open the floodgates and the admission of all those in conflict zones with the family in the UK. So the Home Office is worried this won't just apply to Gazans who want to come to this country,
Afghans,
but anybody else who is in a
and which
war
means
zone.
that if you come here, and we know this to be true because we got figures I think a few months ago, if you come here illegally on a small boat from something, I don't know, Eritrea, you can then ask for your family to come and live with you, even if you haven't actually yet been successful in your asylum claim.
Yes, and you can use the Ukrainian scheme, which was set up.
I mean, it's unbelievable, isn't it?
But the British law works on the basis of precedent. Yeah. So to think that this family is now being successful. Yeah. So if you have future families and they're challenging it and saying, well, hang on a moment, we want to come here as well, to the UK as well. Can you imagine? We could say, well, you set the precedent, you let that family in, therefore you have to let us in.
Exactly right. Can you imagine the Human Rights Brigade absolutely rubbing their hands, going, this is going to be great, because not only will we be able to have loads of work in the future to take these people's cases to tribunals, but we'll get legal aid to do it as well. They'll all be getting very rich on it, won't they?
Yeah, I mean, it's
unbelievable.
And the Tories are making the point that we need to actually just do away with human rights laws. They had 14 years to do it, by the way.
Yeah.
And then,
well, they're responsible for more immigration than any other government in the history of Britain.
And they set up the Ukraine scheme. So you would have thought that somebody might have told them that there is a danger of setting up the Ukraine scheme that could be used by others to come to this country.
But the Ukraine scheme, if I'm not wrong, was set up to be a temporary scheme, wasn't it? So it wasn't set up to allow people to come and settle here. Whereas this would appear to give Gazans the right to settle in the United Kingdom. Whereas Ukrainians never wanted to settle here, as far as I know.
No, but what seems to be the case, and it was this, as you rightly say, it was a scheme that was set up in March 22, is that actually what it seems to be the case, Mike, is that it's allowing people to come to this country on the basis of the Ukraine scheme, and then to come. And you're right to say it was a temporary scheme that was set up for a one-off conflict, and that Ukrainians, once the war was over, or their homes, they could go back to their homes, they would do so. But the problem now is that, of course, that is going to be used by, whether it's Gazans, as you say, Afghans, people in conflict zones around the world. We've seen what's happened in Sudan, to come to this country and, of course, claim the right to live here because, of course, the Ukrainians did it.
Right. And I'm starting to get pretty peed off with some of the judges in this country. This is an immigration judge by the name of Hugo Norton-Taylor, who works in the upper tribunal of the immigration sort of court system. And he's the guy that basically overruled the Home Office and said that this was okay. I was just looking him up, right? He was appointed to be a salaried judge of the upper tribunal on the advice of the Lord Chancellor, the Right Honourable David Gauke. Why am I not surprised? David Gauke, who's more left-wing than the Che Guevara, right? He will be known as Upper Tribunal Judge Norton-Taylor. He will be, let's see, he was reassigned to the First-Tier Tribunal Immigration and Asylum Chamber in 2016, appointed as a fee-paid Deputy Upper Tribunal Judge. So basically, you know, this is a guy who's been in the tribunal immigration system for a good sort of 10 or 12 years. And it seems to me that there's an awful lot of these judges who seem to have no view whatsoever on what people in this country want, and they will no doubt argue that, you know, we do things in a very fair-minded judicial way. It's got nothing to do with politics. It's got everything to do with politics. These are bleeding heart liberals who want to bring every man and his wife and his children and his grandchildren into Britain, despite the fact that it's bleeding well full up.
And you know what convention he used to provide the grant for them?
Not the Human Rights Convention, by any chance.
The European Convention on Human Rights, to be precise.
Of course.
And of course, it used Article 8, which is the right to allow them to appeal the UK decision for a right to a family life. So that's why they've come. That's the convention.
But
and of course, Keir Starmer and Lord Harmer are wedded to it. That European Convention. They're not going to refer.
Lord Harmer, or Lord Harmer, as I would like to call him, it's also on the front pages this morning. And this guy's been in the news now for a good 2 to 3 weeks. So in the news cycle business, when you're talking politics, the rule of Alistair Campbell says you're out. Right? This is a guy who has been in trouble over working for Gerry Adams, working for Shamima Begum, working for lots of different groups of people who would appear to be enemies of Britain, shall we say, advising countries in the Caribbean on how they can get reparations out of the government, advising people from the Chagos Islands how to get asylum in Britain if they want to come here illegally. It now turns out that he supported disgraced solicitor Phil Shiner, who's a guy that many people might not remember, was the guy who tried to sue sue the British government, basically accusing falsely loads of British soldiers in Iraq of unlawful killing and torture, right? He became known as the scourge of the British Army, but he is also a convicted fraudster, and he was supported, of course, by Richard Hermer, the Attorney General.
Yeah, Lord Hermer. I mean, according to the Times, the extraordinary story on the front page of the Times, I'm surprised they didn't splash on it. It's the sidebar of the paper. Said he also greenlit the infamous press conference at which Phil Shiner and another solicitor aired claims later, of course, which we found to be false, of unlawful killings and torture by British soldiers in Iraq. So this is a decade-old recording. Yeah. It's been unearthed by the paper. I mean, it's great work by them. And this is what he said. This is what Lord Hermer, now Lord Hermer, says of Phil Shiner. Phil has caused the government a great deal of aggravation over the last 15 years. He's brought successfully some extraordinary important cases which have exposed systemic use of torture, for example, by the British Army in Iraq. Yeah. Which, of course, those claims turned out to be false.
Everything
everybody, you know, his cabinet, Keir Starmer's cabinet, are up in arms about him. He's getting in the way. Keir Starmer appears to be the last person to see the problem that having Lord Hermer as his Attorney General.
Because he's his mate. Yeah. Same as Tulip Sadiq. You know, he could have got rid of her back in December. He waited until the Christmas period was over, and then he eventually had to get rid of her sometime in the beginning of January, right? But she was under pressure for a good 6 weeks before that, and he just wouldn't do anything about it. Hermer's got to go. There's no question.
Well, we saw how quickly he was willing to dispatch of members of his cabinet. Louise Haigh, of course. As a result of the Transport Secretary.
This week sacking Andrew Gwynn.
She wasn't his mate. She went within 24 hours of those. I
mean, Andrew Gwynn was gone before the Mail on Sunday had even come out. After the Mail on Sunday rang them to say, by the way, have you heard what this guy's been doing on WhatsApp? He was gone Saturday night.
Yeah. He went. I mean, the story broke because they sacked him.
Yeah. Speaking of which, we must play you this. I'm sure you've seen it, but others may have seen it yesterday. But it's so well worth playing again. Lee Anderson, Reform Party MP, of course, got up on his hind legs during yesterday's debating scenario about all sorts of things. Ashley Dalton, who's the new health minister, appointed by the Prime Minister, who thinks that it's OK to identify as a llama. Wes Streeting was answering questions, the Secretary of State for Health. Here's what Lee Anderson asked him.
Lee Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now, the new Health Minister has stated that it's OK for a human being to present as a llama. So what I want to know is, if I have a family member who presents as a llama, suddenly becomes ill in the middle of the night, do they send for a doctor, a vet or a straitjacket?
Mr. Speaker, I can just say to the honourable member that my honourable friend, the Minister for Public Health, believes in treating every human being with the dignity and respect they deserve, even the honourable gentleman.
Yes. So far, nothing on whether or not a man can have a vagina or a woman can have a penis, by the way. Yeah. But, yeah, very close. Lee Anderson, I mean, stand-up comedy awaits.
What's really interesting, actually, was it was Conservative research that discovered these comments by Ashley Dalton that you could identify as a llama, right? So the Conservative, they have a very well organised department that goes away and does the research, and this stuff is in the public domain, and they obviously found out that, you know, this comment. But it's Lee Anderson, the Reform MP, who stands up in the House of Commons with the really pithy question that gets a laugh and that we can use on talk radio and make a joke about.
This is why we were talking about Kemi Badenoch yesterday, and somebody said to me, I think we had Nigel Huddleston was on, the co-chairman of the Tory party, and we were talking, and I said, you know, Nigel Farage has come out and said that he would reverse the inheritance tax the Labour Party is trying to put on farmers. And he said, oh, well, I'm very glad that Lee's finally caught up with Kemi Badenoch. She announced that last week. And I went, well, I missed that, because the trouble is when she does things, nobody really notices, because she does it in such a way that it sort of doesn't stick in the mind for some reason. I don't know what that is. I don't know why that is.
She's asked the wrong questions. She's asked the wrong questions week after week at PMQs. Yeah. She's allowed Starmer to get the better of her on weeks when actually it's been a bit of a slam dunk. Yeah. She should actually win those exchanges at PMQs.
She should.
And she hasn't set out
Keir
any
Starmer
policies.
is completely and utterly wooden, hopeless, but actually she makes him look better than he is.
Yes.
At Prime Minister's questions.
And given the amount of material, and we're starting, you know, since the new year, we've started to move into, given that we're talking about however many stories on the front pages of the papers, inside of the papers today, which are, you know, damaging to the government, right? And
totally.
And it's now starting to move away from, well, you lot were in charge last time. There's so much material here.
Well, that's the trouble.
For her to go on. She doesn't need to worry about what happened over the last 14 years now. We can, you know, there's so much, whether it's there's so much that she can actually say, well, hang on a moment, let's ask a question about this or that. That actually, you can't just come back and say,
well, you can just run through
it.
even the gamut of the 4 or 5 people who've left the government since they got in, and they haven't yet been in 8 months. You know, starting with Sue Gray, who was in the House of Lords yesterday. We'll have a look at her in a minute. Then going on to Louise Haigh, as you say, the convicted fraudster who turned out to be Secretary of State for Transport. Then Tulip Sadiq, corruption minister, being investigated for corruption. Now, you know, Andrew Gwynn making terrible statements on WhatsApp, and now 11 councillors have been fired as a result of that as well. A second MP, Oliver, what's his name? And then today we've got, you know, yet more kind of ordure being poured all over Lord Harmer, who's probably going to go, I would think, before Easter at this rate. And that's, there's your, in a nutshell, that's how bad the government is.
Yeah, he's got to go. And then the Mail's got a story. I mean, you know, if that isn't enough, Mike, the Mail's got a story saying the new Borders watchdog
this is great
is going to work from home.
Yeah.
But guess where?
In Finland. I mean, you couldn't make it up. I mean,
this is a government priority.
I know, but is there not anybody? I mean, you've worked in this business a long time. Is there nobody sitting inside of Downing Street who goes, guys, come on, we need to get a grip of the communications problem we've got, because we've got 1,500 different strands to what we're doing, all of which are going wrong. Everything's going wrong.
They're getting overwhelmed.
Yeah.
They're getting there's too many things, and they're not scrutinising it. So what you would think, right, is that you've got this John Tuckett. He's 73 years old. He's been named as the government's preferred candidate for the role. You would have thought that at some point before he was named as the government's preferred candidate for the role, somebody would come in and said, Mr. Tuckett, how do you plan to do the job? And he might have said, well, you know, I've got this really lovely place. It's beautiful this time of year. We've got reindeer out in Finland, and I'd like to
the reindeer.
And there are reindeer in Finland.
No, I'm sure there are. No, I'm sure there are. I just was amused to hear the word reindeer in the same breath as, you know, borders are. You know, keep the reindeer out.
So you got the reindeer. Now so say that again. So you'd get the special advisor or the person who's in charge of appointing for this role. So say this again. So you want to be the borders watchdog SAR for this country, preventing people from coming to this country, whilst working from home, looking out of your window at reindeer.
Country.
In Finland. And somebody might have said, well, look, that's going to be problematic.
That
we can't get that one through. This is a really important job. This is one of our priorities. You need to be at your desk in Whitehall 5 days a week, working 10, 12 hours a day.
You can catch a plane on Friday night and come back on Sunday, like most people do who have to work away from home.
We're paying you £130,000 a year.
Right.
There you go.
Would you mind just turning up?
Yeah, just turn up and do it.
And if you can't commit to that, then I'm sorry, you can't have the job.
We'll find someone else.
Exactly right. Unbelievable. Theo Usherwood's here. I'm Mike Graham. We've got loads more. By the way, going back to this ridiculous judge in the case over in the Gazans coming here, Hugo Norton-Taylor. These are the same people, by the way, who said that the Albanian couldn't be deported because his son doesn't like the chicken nuggets they make there. And similarly, the Pakistani paedophile who can't be sent back to Pakistan because of right to a family life with his children, who he doesn't live with. I mean, something's got to be done about these bleeding immigration judges, doesn't it? This is Morning Glory. Back after this.
she's now been disciplined. She's gone to an employment tribunal. But astonishingly, at the tribunal yesterday, Dr. Beth Upton, the man, said that trans women have the right to get changed in front of female colleagues, insisted that he is biologically female, and said sex had no defined or agreed meaning in science. Actually said that. He said, I'm not a robot, so I'm biological, and my identity is female. Without wanting to appeal to the dictionary too much, I'm biologically female.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 24 minutes past 6. I'm Mike Graham. How about this? Good morning, Mike and Theo, says Jules in London. I wonder how many of the pro-Palestinian marchers would take in a family from Gaza. I bet none. Well, this is part of the problem, actually. One of the things I would say about the whole Gaza problem is that many of the people marching in these marches in London is actually Palestinian. Right, and so they've come here, and they will now no doubt claim, if they've got family in Palestine, that family can now come and live here.
Those marches are really worrying.
Yeah,
we've seen demonstrations where Jewish community being prevented from, or harassed as they're going to their
trying to go to synagogues. They always do them on a Saturday.
It's Saturday.
Right.
They're always on a Saturday. They are really concerning, and it's a the danger is that when they for too long they weren't policed properly, and they weren't treated as they should have been by the Metropolitan Police and limited in a suitable way. You had people who were counter-protesting, saying, "Hang on a moment, you've got Hamas, supporting signs supporting Hamas being displayed during these marches.
Yeah.
How come they're allowed?" And then if you have a counter-protest saying that you can't have that, you get those people being spoken to by the police. They're really concerning, and of course it comes from the very top as well.
And we also saw, didn't we, that when the ceasefire was actually enacted, they still went and did another protest. And we also know that from the story we did the other day, that on October the 7th, they were planning to march even before they asked permission to march on October 7th, even before the attack happened in the kibbutz. So they kind of had almost inside information from Hamas about what was going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, what do we want? We want a ceasefire. You've got a ceasefire.
Yeah.
Okay, we're still going to have a march.
Right.
What they want, look, let's be honest about it.
They want the end of Israel.
They want the end of Israel.
Yeah.
And the really important point here that I think gets lost and people don't understand is that Israel is the only functioning democracy in the Middle East.
Of course it is.
It represents Western values.
Yeah.
You can walk down, two men can walk down a high street in Tel Aviv holding hands, and you can have same-sex relationships, and it is very close to the same as the democracy we have here in London or in New York or in Los Angeles or in Paris or in Madrid.
It's called civilization.
You want to try and do that?
It's called civilization.
You want to try and do that in Rafah?
Yeah.
You want to try and walk down, have a same-sex relationship and walk down holding your partner's hand in Rafah? See what happens.
Yeah.
You probably get thrown off the top of a very tall building very quickly.
Exactly right.
And that's the problem, is that people don't recognise what actually Israel represents as a country, and actually that's the same as what we want here and what we enjoy here in London.
And for all the sort of pearl clutching that went on from the left this week about Donald Trump's idea of turning Gaza into a sort of holiday resort, effectively. Yesterday, King Abdullah II of Jordan met with Donald Trump and actually said, "I truly believe with all the challenges we have in the Middle East, I finally see somebody who can take us across the finish line to bring stability, peace and prosperity to all of us in the region." So he's backing the plan.
Yeah.
Right? Now, if Jordan's back in the plan, maybe Egypt will go along, and suddenly you've got a possibility of actually getting Hamas out of the way and forming a place where the Palestinians can go and live for a while they rebuild the Gaza Strip. I don't think that is in any way a bad ending to a horrible situation. But the truth is, that a lot of Palestinians don't want that because they don't want to have peace.
No, Hamas doesn't want... Hamas has stated it.
No, I'm not talking about Hamas.
You're
I'm talking about
people in Palestine. Yeah, absolutely.
And we're going to bring these people to Britain to live? Is that a great idea or what?
Good.
Hey?
Well, according to Hugo Norton-Taylor, that's exactly what's going to happen.
I know.
But what Donald Trump has said basically is, are we really going to do the same thing all over again? Are we going to do the last 18 months since October the 7th, 2023? Are we just going to do a rerun where Hamas goes back into Gaza, the Palestinians go back into Gaza, we have further attacks against Israel. Israel then,
goes back to
basics, try and root out
Starts dropping
Hamas,
bombs on them.
And then we just do a complete rerun.
And that, of course, that is exactly what Hamas wants, because if there is peace, they're out of a job.
Yeah.
That's the bottom line. Let's get a voice note from James.
Good morning, Mike. Why don't these politicians put these so-called refugees up in their houses? They won't do that, will they? Because I certainly won't. Anyway, Mike, have a great show, mate.
Thank you very much indeed. Let's have a look at Elon Musk with Donald Trump, because some fascinating pictures came out yesterday from Washington, D.C. We know that Keir Starmer's going over there soon, maybe the end of the month. But this is what he's going to find when he gets to the Oval Office inside the White House.
We have this unelected, fourth unconstitutional branch of government, which is the bureaucracy, which has, in a lot of ways, currently more power than any elected representative. And this is not something that people want, and it's not. It does not match the will of the people. So it's just something we've got to fix.
I mean, there's a certain irony there with Elon Musk standing there talking in the White House with Donald Trump, the President of the United States, to his left, who was elected in a democratic way. He wasn't.
No.
He's just been appointed to be put in charge of efficiency. He seems to be doing a great job, by the way, of completely ripping to shreds all of the ridiculous monies that were being paid out by USAID. But there is a certain irony of him standing there talking about democracy when he wasn't elected.
Yes, I think there is a certain irony, and I also worry a little bit for Elon Musk. Donald Trump is a one-man show, and if you're there standing next to Donald Trump and you're giving the speech, that might be the wrong way round.
Well, I presume that Donald Trump wanted him there.
Yeah, wanted him there and wanted to give the speech, but if I would... far be it from us to discuss how to advise Elon Musk on this show, but I would from listening to people who've worked with Donald Trump and they do podcasts or whatever, the advice is always let Donald Trump be the main man, let him speak, because if you don't...
Well, I mean, I didn't get the impression that Trump was in any way being silenced there. I think he was encouraging Musk, because, I mean, he can get Musk to do an awful lot of the things that he wouldn't perhaps want to be seen doing. That's what's great.
I listened to... I was listening to Andrew Neil. He made a very good point. I was listening to him the other day. It's like, who would you trust to get to the bottom of government waste? Would you trust Elon Musk to root out government waste, or would you trust Rachel Reeves to root out government waste? And
that's
of course,
a good question.
And the civil servants, here in this country, they want to cut government waste by 5%. You've seen how fast they've acted in the United States. OK, a couple of those decisions have been blocked by various judges.
Yeah, but they've basically done it overnight.
They just went in and they just did it. And of course, I mean,
they're basically 3 weeks in. We're like 8 months in, and they've done more in those 3 weeks than this lot have done in Britain. And they're
just scything through huge parts of the American bureaucratic state, and it's just going to be, and it's constant, isn't it? Every day we've seen, in this country, as a British political journalist, you see number 10, Prime Minister's team sort of jump, 5 feet in the air when they come to try and work out how are they going to manage all of the news coming out from the White House. Yesterday it was steel tariffs. What's going to happen? We're now having to actually say to the European Union, which is probably no bad thing. You know what? If you want to do retaliatory tariffs against Donald Trump, go ahead. We're not going to be part of it. Of course,
I saw a Labour MP being interviewed over the weekend. I can't remember his name because it's one of those insignificant ones, but he was basically saying, look, we have to recognise that there are things happening in America which are proving that we should be able to do things quicker, that we need to be more agile, that we need to be more, flexible about changing the way things are done. And we can't just keep having inquiry after inquiry. We can't just kick things into the long grass. We can't just go, oh, we'll have a look at that next year, because things in America are being proven to be possible to be done literally overnight. And
I think this is going to be really interesting for reform and for Nigel Farage come the next election. And one would presume that he's still going to be very much in the game and actually, is going to be how you say, you know, to Keir Starmer is going to look and say, well, look at what I've done, look at what I've delivered. But he's going to be comparing himself against Donald Trump. Yeah. Think about how much Donald Trump, as you say, has done in, 3 weeks?
Yeah, 3 weeks.
And a bit weeks.
It was in 20 days, I think, this week.
And the American election is going to be before then. He's going to get to the end of his second term in office, and Keir Starmer then is going to be facing a general election. And the British public are going to have 2 report cards to look at. We're going to have what Keir Starmer's and Rachel Reeves and his cabinet have achieved here in Britain, and what has Donald Trump managed to achieve.
But also,
in the United States.
Also shows is Keir Starmer's complete and utter disregard for the public, whereas Donald Trump's doing exactly what he said he was going to do. CBS poll over the weekend: 70% of people in America are happy with what he's doing because he promised to do it and he's getting on with it. Keir Starmer keeps putting out these ridiculous sort of tweets on social media, fixing the foundations. You know, we are putting the wealth back into the country. He's making these statements which is simply not true, saying that, you know, he's getting people money back in their pockets. It's not happening. You know, we are building growth. It's not happening. We're fixing the NHS. No, you're not. You know, so he also is being exposed as a man who's basically just talking a lot of old cobblers. And he's saying things, but he's not doing anything.
But also Donald Trump just speaks in a way that ordinary Americans can understand. If you listen to him, he just, you know, he says it like Americans will understand, like his voters will understand it. So, you know, you heard what he had to say on Gaza yesterday. If you don't have bandit hostages by 12 o'clock on Saturday, all hell's going to break loose. And you're going to find out. And that's just his mannerisms and his way of delivering his message is just so much clearer to ordinary Americans compared to the messaging that we get from
it's
number
no
10.
BS, basically, isn't it? I mean, that's what we're talking about. But luckily, he's now got a new person to talk to. Peter Mandelson, my Lord Mandelson, has finally been approved to be the ambassador to the US of A. And he put out a rather, what can only be described as oleaginous a tweet yesterday talking about how happy he was to be appointed. Have a look.
Hello, I'm Peter Mandelson, and I'm proud to serve as His Majesty's British Ambassador to the United States of America. It's great to be up and running in the US, a country in which I have spent so much of my adult life and admire so much.
I'm so happy for him. It's great to be here, living in this incredibly big house in Washington, D.C., being paid by the public's purse. It's a beautiful place. I've been there, as I'm sure you have. But, you know, I mean, nobody gives a stuff what Peter Mandelson thinks, do they? You know, I'm so happy to be here. Well, great, good. I'm very pleased for you.
I was here wondering, he gave quite an interesting quote the other day. I saw in one of the interviews where he said, I think he was in the same interview when, yes, he wasn't telling people to F. But quite an interesting quote where he said, I want to be below the radar rather than on the radar. I just look at that and think, you looks like you want to be on the radar.
It looks like you want to be very important. It looks like you want to be discussing things at a very high level. You want to be invited to all the big parties in Washington, which is a party discussion. And, you know, I don't know. I mean, I find myself just sort of sighing that somebody like that, with his reputation, having had to quit twice from the government in Tony Blair's day because of, you know, questions. You know, the Dark Lord, as he's known as, we're saying there. You know, he's not a very nice man.
But his outlook is also completely different from Donald Trump. You know, he was, along with Gordon Brown, you know, they were the triumvirate of New Labour. You know, this was in the late 90s and the noughties. You know, this was an outward-looking...
And he loves the EU, let's not forget.
And
he's
an
EU commissioner. And do you know what? I didn't know until I read this, and you may have known this already, but apparently when you are an EU commissioner and you retire from that, you get a very, very nice pension. Thank you very much indeed. But part of the sort of the principle of you getting the pension is that you never criticise the European Union. So for the rest of his life, he's never going to criticise the European Union. How's that going to play in the White House?
May well have to. May well have to. But it's just, he has that sort of expansive approach to world politics. That's not what Donald Trump is about. No. Donald Trump is about putting America first. And it's about how we can fit in, little old Britain can fit in, with that narrative. It's not about... And I just worry a little bit that so much political capital has been spent on getting Peter Mandelson into that post and ensuring that he was going to be approved as the British ambassador to the United States. And there was a question mark over it for a good couple of weeks. Actually, why don't we just leave Karen Pierce there?
Yeah.
She spent, you know, she may not be a household. She may not be a household name. She may not have the background or the hinterland of Lord Mandelson. But she'd worked so hard at cultivating relationships with Trump. Keir Starmer has a huge amount to thank her for, because given what Labour did during the campaign, with sending activists over to campaign for the Democrats, volunteers, she managed to then secure a phone call with Trump, multiple phone calls with Trump, and he was speaking, you know, congratulated him in November. You know, that would have been the easier option, I'd have thought.
Yeah, it
just say, actually, you know what, Karen Pierce, you just carry on. You built the relations there. You just get on and do.
Yeah, exactly. And also, as long as you've got Mandelson sitting there, he's going to have the old puppeteer Tony Blair not very far away. But coming up, we're going to talk some more about some of the other stories that are going on, which have got nothing to do with politics. One is a woman who says she can't be deported to the Caribbean because it's too hot for a boyfriend who won't like it because he's not from there. We're going to be talking about why children are so fat they're apparently having hip operations because they need to lose an awful lot of weight. There's a trigger warning on Father Ted that we've got to get to as well. It's all happening. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until, of course, 10 o'clock. Julie Hartley-Prim will be here then. Morning, Mike, says Claire. These judges aren't liberal. I see them as radically far left and enemies of the people of this country. That goes for our Home Office. It's a tragedy. You can't just tell all these radically indoctrinated people to come into our country from Gaza. You absolutely can't. It's absolutely incredible. But another kind of immigration-related story, Theo Osborne's here with us, is a mother who arrived in the UK on a 6-month visa but never left, has apparently managed to delay her deportation after claiming that her Caribbean home would be too hot for her new husband, who happens to be from Latvia and very white. And apparently doesn't like the hot weather. She basically came here in March 2018 with her son, then stayed illegally. I presume she came on holiday. Stayed illegally after a visitor visa expired. Then she got together with this Latvian forklift driver guy called Konstantins Vinakovs, who's got permanent settled status. I mean, is there anybody who doesn't have permanent settled status? If you walk down the street, you don't hear anybody speaking English, but they've all got permanent settled status. What's going on?
So look, this is the week, by the way, that the Home Office, the government put out those videos of people being deported.
Oh, yeah.
And Yvette Cooper was turning up on raids. As
rah, look at all the big deportations we're doing.
Look at all the deportations we're doing. And this is, you know, focusing on people who've arrived in this country and then overstayed their visas, just like this Grenadian national who's come to this country in March 2018 and then stayed illegally after her visitor visa expired. So these are exactly the same things. But in this particular case, as you say, they've managed to convince the judge that actually their husband, who is, I guess, prone to sunburn because he comes from Latvia, can't be deported because they have a right under. Again, it's the same. It's the same piece. It's the same part of the European Convention on Human Rights as the case of the Gazan. As the Gazan family who's now got the right to come here, it's Article 8, which is the right to a family life.
Yeah, so every single human rights lawyer will be using it or finding some way to use it in order to make sure that whoever it is that they're representing can never leave.
I think what's going to... Keir Starmer and Lord Hermer are going to come to a point, I'd imagine, fairly quickly, where they're going to have to show their cards when it comes to this European Convention on Human Rights. We know that they're in favour of it, especially Lord Hermer is in favour of this European Convention on Human Rights. But we've got elections coming up in Germany, and the right-wing CDU party, which is very likely to win those elections, they're very concerned now about the European Convention on Human Rights. There is a growing momentum in Europe that this convention is not working and needs to be reformed radically to stop these particular cases. Because this is...
You know, as I've often said, we could just ignore the ECHR and do whatever it is that we want, because that's what countries in Europe do when they feel like it.
Yeah, they could. We could ignore it. But if Keir Starmer wants to be Keir Starmer, let's just play along with me for a second. If I'm Keir
I don't want to be even thinking about being Keir Starmer.
No, but if you're Keir Starmer and you're saying, I need, I'm a lawyer and I believe in human rights and I believe in the European Convention of Human Rights and international law because that's what I believe in, he's going to have his opportunity very soon, I imagine, to actually say, when other countries turn around and say, look, this isn't working for us, we've got migrants just coming into our country, we're unable to deport them, we need a solution, we need to reform it, and he's going to have to come out and say one thing or another. But it's going to be no good. It's clear from this case, from the Gazan case, it's no good to continually say, well, the convention has to stand. Because it's just being abused.
It's being abused. We're having the mickey taken out of us, for want of a better word, I can't say at this time in the morning. How about this, though? If you want even more trouble from the legal fraternity, a story in the Telegraph, which came into me overnight. One of the international judges who ruled against Britain over the Chagos Islands is a former Chinese government official who backed Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And she's a woman who works as a vice president of the International Court of Justice. Zhu Hangqin ruled that the UK should give the islands to Mauritius as rapidly as possible. Right? She's a member of the Chinese Communist Party, and she sits on the bench of the International Court of Justice. And these are the people to whose tune we are dancing. So David Lammy and Keir Starmer, you pair of complete and utter bozos, you're actually listening to somebody who's got China's interests at heart, who backed Russia fighting in Ukraine. What's going on with that?
Are you able to export the common sense that exists in this studio, Mike Graham?
I wish I could.
And you just take it, bottle it up, and you just take a bottle of it over to the Foreign Office and say, look, here is a bottle of Mike Graham Morning Glory common sense. You just need to have a slurp of this and you'll start making decent decisions.
It would be good, but I don't even need to have any kind of props for the possibility of looking into a case like this, literally 5 inches into what you would be seeing and go, oh, one of the people calling for us to get rid of the Chagos Islands has got China's interests at heart, and China will benefit massively if Mauritius gets them.
And the argument, Stephen Doherty, by the way, who's the Foreign Office Minister who's in charge of this, has been writing in another newspaper, it was in the Times today, he's been making the argument that if we don't sign up to this, acknowledge this ICJ ruling, that, there needs to be a deal, then what you're going to have is a situation where China's going to set up a spy base, or another country might set up a spy base on an island close to Diego Garcia and try and spy on the American and British forces that operate from that base. The problem is they've looked at this, they've looked at this case and they've gone, you know what? The solution to this is a legal solution. It's not. It's a political solution. We share that base with the most powerful military in the world.
There's an easy solution. Just don't do it.
Don't do it. Ignore it. Bin it. Forget it. Don't do it. watch what happens when Mauritius tries to say to China, oh yeah, you can just set up, I think they're one of the islands called Danger Island.
Right.
You just set up a base on Danger Island. Just watch what happens with Trump in the White House when Diego Garcia, they're flying, we understand, they fly B-52 bombers from B-2 bombers
there was a guy,
Diego
a former
Garcia.
MI6 boss, who said basically there's a risk, genuine risk, that if we give those islands to the Mauritians, that basically our planes and the American planes will be shot down by the Chinese.
Yeah, just forget it. They're not. The Americans aren't going to mess around with this type of stuff. The solution is political. The Chinese are treating it as a political.
Of course they are.
Because they've got this Miss Zhu
Hankin.
Yeah. This
whoever she is,
they've treated it. They've just played. It's obvious, isn't it? What's happened? They've got their person on the. It's obvious to you.
It's obvious to me. It's obvious to everybody listening. Obviously to everybody who's watching this show. But apparently not obvious to the dimwit David Lammy or the other dimwit Keir Starmer.
But this is
a pair of absolute planks.
But we're looking at £18 billion potentially, and that's
according to Nigel Farage, it's 52 billion by the time you've added up the years.
But this is at a time when Rachel Reeves is likely to come back later in the spring. The OBR forecast, there's a story on the front page. The Telegraph as well.
Put more taxes up.
So they're going to have to they're going to come back in the spring, and they're probably going to have to turn that into a budget. So they're probably going to have to start raising taxes and cutting spending, which actually is it, for Labour MPs who are saying, well, we don't want to return to austerity 2.0, Cameron and Osborne, you're going to see cuts to Whitehall spending right across the board. And Rachel Reeves is going to have to do it because the markets, just across the river there in the City of London, they're not liking what they're seeing when it comes to the growth prospects in this country. So she's going to have to cut spending, put up taxes. And your listeners must just sit back and just think, hang on, and we're giving 18 billion to the Chagos Islands?
Exactly right.
Really?
Well, it's exactly right, and it's complete and utter nonsense. We're nearly out of time. We've got one more bit to go. We're going to come back with a story from the front page of The Sun, Go Complain, which is that bloke from Go Compare, the ad, who's apparently going to take the BBC to a tribunal because he got sacked off Strictly for saying something that somebody didn't like. Also, we'll talk about Father Ted and children who are too fat, so fat that they're having hip operations because they can't walk. Unbelievable. This is Talk.
I think the increase in ethnic diversity among Gen Z has caused this split. I mean, you say, for example, Stonewall lobbying for the ability for gay people to go about their daily business and not be attacked, right? If you then import a large diaspora of Muslims, second and third generation, according to Henry Jackson Society polling, are more likely to be intolerant, even if they're university educated, then you've increased that level of homophobia or intolerance or illiberalism,
and yet the same group of people support both.
Exactly.
There's
So you're almost
problem.
engineering your own crisis.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. This, of course, is the home of common sense. It's the one place to come to get the unvarnished news that you won't get anywhere else, because everywhere else they'll give you their own sort of version of the news. We'll give you what is not a version of the news, it's actually the news. And while we're at it, shall we have a look at Sue Gray just before we move on? Theo Usherwood's here with me. Sue Gray was, believe it or not, sort of inducted into the House of Lords yesterday, and here she is. Let's have a look.
I, Susan, Baroness Gray of Tottenham, do swear by Almighty God that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to His Majesty King Charles, his heirs and successors, according to law, so help me God.
I mean, when I saw that yesterday, I thought to myself, if you ever wanted a reason to shut down the House of Lords, because that woman does not deserve to be there, and is only really there because of a favour that she did for Keir Starmer over Boris Johnson and Partygate, and then joining the Labour Party, but she achieved absolutely the square root of nothing, sweet FA, you might say, and suddenly now she's got a job for life in the House of Lords where she'll pick up a very handy 365 quid every time she turns up. I just think it shows Britain to be a sort of, you know, a vapid and completely out-of-date state, really.
I think, just to go back to, you know, Keir Starmer's insistence that he was going to turn this government into a government of public service. Yeah. That, you know, his whole raison d'etre. This is it, though, isn't it? It's Sue Gray.
Cronyism,
it's cronyism
personified, which he said he would kill off.
He said he would get rid of it. You'd end up, you know, they campaigned on, you know, COVID VIP lanes. The last government introduced. They campaigned on, you know, Tory malfeasance and corruption. You know, that was their whole campaign, right through to the general election. Keir Starmer, often when it came to policy issues, would say something along the lines of, you know, there's not a cigarette paper between us. I remember him saying that on immigration, particularly. Yes, OK, there were some dividing lines in the general election campaign itself, but certainly in the run-up, it was all not necessarily about the content of any policies, but it was about the substance of Labour, you know, being the grown-ups, the people who could be trusted to run the country, and yet we ended up 4 months into office. We had a whole load of freebie gates and
the soups, the glasses, free trips.
You know, Sue Gray as Chief of Staff, did she, you know, stamp out this story really quickly by turning around and saying, listen, we need to apologise for this?
No. No, she was too busy fighting with Morgan McSweeney.
Lord Ali.
No, that's enough about her. Let's talk about the BBC, because front page of The Sun, we've got basically Wyn Evans, who's the guy from the Go Compare ads. That's how everybody knows him. Great headlines as Go Complain. He's basically been dumped by Strictly because he made some off-colour remark about a spit roast, apparently. He's denying that it was aimed at any particular contestant. He's now saying he's going to take them to a tribunal because he feels like he's been thrown under a bus. And again, it comes back to this ridiculous business, doesn't it, of people being cancelled for doing things which, you know, in most situations would not really be worth being fired for.
Yeah, and I think what's going to be interesting about this, he feels like he's been knifed and thrown under the bus by the BBC. I think what's going to be really, really interesting to see is what side does the tribunal come down on?
Yeah, right.
And if they turn around...
Well, hope he doesn't get that immigration judge.
Yeah, but if they turn around and they give him a huge, great big payoff and the BBC has to apologise for the way they handled the case, that's going to be mightily embarrassing.
It will be.
And I think there's a divide between the way the BBC think they should act, of course, with with Wyn Evans, the way the public might want them to act with Wyn Evans, and actually the way that the law has to be applied and he has to be treated. And he feels that he hasn't been given a way to defend himself.
I get a sense that an awful lot of people now think that this whole cancel culture thing has gone too far, and people are losing jobs for reasons which they shouldn't be losing them for. But we'll watch that one with interest. Let's look at another story in The Sun, page 11. Kids are so fat they need hip operations at the age of just 10. I mean, a huge surge in obesity. Incredible, isn't it? At least 9 youngsters aged between 10 and 14 needed hip replacements as a result of their weight problems in the past 5 years. Shocking.
It's just computer games. It's like, I don't know, when I was a kid, when kids would just run around. They just go out into the park, get on a bike, go to the park, play football. But it's computer games, it's social media, it's phones. You know, you increasingly just see kids walking around like zombies with their phones just glued to their faces.
The other thing you see them doing, and I see this a lot if I'm around sort of at school closing time, 3:30, 4 o'clock, is they're all queuing up outside the kebab shop. I mean, you know, they're literally, certainly in my part of London, you know, there's fast food joints everywhere. And there's a chicken shop here, the kids in school uniform queuing up in the kebab shop. I mean, presumably they're going home and having dinner, but they're eating this kind of big meal at 4 o'clock.
And
bags of
it's
chips.
Fatty, unhealthy food. But they need to be running around playing football.
They do.
And we've also seen, like, is it enough just to have one lesson of PE a week? You know, just football clubs, sport. That's really important.
It really is.
And it is important. It's not just important for the kids who are really good at it, but all of them. And that's how
they learn about team building. They learn all sorts of things. Anyway, final one for you, because we're nearly out of time. Channel 4 put a trigger warning on Father Ted. Great headline again in The Sun, page 3. What the feck? Which I've been already told by my producer that I can say. Good. Because that's how they got around it in the first place, because it's an Irish version of the F word, basically. But it says that, you know, they fear that a 1998 episode, Are You Right There, Father Ted, could upset today's viewers because of its language and scenes of racial impersonation, including somebody impersonating the Chinese by wearing a lampshade on their heads. I mean, come on, get a sense of humour, boys.
I don't know. I don't understand this trigger warning thing, but maybe I don't know if it's a get out so that they don't find themselves.
It's not.
Channel
it's
4.
Just them trying to be bloody. You know.
Do you think it is?
Yeah. Just.
But wasn't the beauty? Wasn't the beauty of Father Ted? Was it sort of? It was that comedy where he said the things that you couldn't say.
Exactly.
And that was
but
was
also
the joke.
He's an idiot. And that's the whole point of it. It's a bit like Fawlty Towers. You know, the guy who's making the racist comments is an idiot. That's why it's funny. But it's not like, it's not a shame for him to say them. But we're literally out of time.
But this the British public love it. I've got a friend who's got a part. They've got a part in the Fawlty Towers at one of the London theatres, and it's sold out.
Of course. We'll be back. Thank you, Theo. After the news.
I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
I have just returned from Buckingham Palace to form the next government of this great nation.
Take a look at what happened. I immediately knew it was very serious, that we were under attack.
The time has come, and this surely is England's time. Williams, who scores, and Spain lead. The shot from distance is in. It is Cole Palmer. Low ball in or far ball, slides it in.
An absolute killer of a goal.
I agree with the protest, but I don't think the violence was anywhere near necessary.
No, I mean, I don't think anyone, Nigel, would ever think that the violence was the answer at all.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs. The people that came in, they're eating the cats.
Liberal left couldn't understand that this man could be anything other than the great newsreader, a man of integrity.
Is it possible in any way, shape or form that Keir Starmer didn't know about these facts about the suspect in Southport?
I find it extraordinary that he wouldn't know. It seems that the public is not being told the truth.
No. There's nothing like an American election, I have to say. North Dakota has gone red, South Dakota's red, Texas is red.
Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason.
Bloomberg UK reporting Ukraine has made the first long-range...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's 2 minutes past 7. I'm Mike Graham, with you all the way through until 10 o'clock. 4 glorious hours of Morning Glory now, every single weekday morning from 6 a.m. sharp. If you missed the first hour, you've missed an awfully good run-through of all the big stories in the papers. To wit, starting on page 1 of the Daily Telegraph, apparently thanks to an immigration judge called Hugo Norton-Taylor, people in Gaza will be allowed to come and live in the United Kingdom as long as they've got some kind of relative here. Basically, human rights lawyers have decided that they can access a new way of coming to this country for people from Gaza because of the Ukrainian scenario. When people came here from Ukraine, even though that was a temporary situation, it now would appear that there is precedent that's been set, and so people can come not just from Gaza but from all over the world as long as they've got a relative already living here. And we know, for example, that that is already something that people are doing who come here on the small boats. I mean, is there nobody in this country that is going to actually safeguard the people in this country who are already living here? And by that, I also count the many legal migrants who have come here to live and have gone through the mill to actually apply and do proper applications for the right to live in this great country of ours. Surely to God, it's not just an open door policy for any human rights lawyer to walk straight through. And also, if we are inviting people to come here from Gaza, how do you know they're not members of Hamas? There's an awful lot of them, seem to be. 0344 499 1000. Coming up, we're going to be talking to Dan Hodges. He's here from the Mail on Sunday. The Mail front page is even better. They've got a story basically saying that the new head of border security in this country is going to be coming to work, but not actually coming to work. They're going to be working from home because actually why bother coming into an office? But don't worry, it's not just working from any old home. It's working from a home in Finland. Yeah, that's right. A completely foreign country. 0344 499 1000 is the number. If you've forgotten how to get in touch, have a listen to this.
Hi, Mike. Jill from Northampton here. Love waking up with you at 6 o'clock on my TV.
Morning, Mike. Well, I'd like to apologise, first of all. I slept in, missed 8 minutes of your show, but it's my day off anyway.
Just listening to you guys going through the latest news and headlines, I just despair.
Well, I don't despair. Just get in touch. You know what to do. You can send us a voice note, of course, as well. We've got lots more going on. Of course, the front page of The Sun has got Go Complain, because the Go Compare singer Wyn Evans is ready to take the BBC to a tribunal over being sacked from the Strictly Live tour because of something that he said, which he says he didn't mean. I mean, the cancel culture we thought was over. Apparently, it's not. 0344 499 1000. Coming up, we've got lots more to do as well. We want to hear from you. We're going to talk about Rachel Reeves. She's apparently got no fiscal headroom. Maybe she should just change the colour of her hair again. And she's going to have to put taxes up. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. We've got this from Alan in Merseyside. He said, we should demand that we leave the ECHR. It's our money they are wasting. I'm not working so these idiots can waste my money. Let's vote to put it on the voting slip in the local elections. I know it's a national issue, so why not? Well, I mean, I suppose you could do that. I don't know what the precedent is for putting extra questions on voting papers. And, of course, if you live in some places in the country, particularly the South East, certainly in Sussex, you won't have a vote in the local elections because there aren't any happening. Let's get a voice note from Tim.
Morning, Mike. Great show, as always. Just a quick one on the Keir Starmer and ECHR.
He's already been asked about the ECHR. I have the audio and his answer. I'll play it for you. We must never leave the ECHR. It is international law that must be obeyed at all times. As a side note, I'm blank.
It's absolutely right. I mean, that could have been him saying it. Very good. Well done, Tim. Lots of you are getting well into the spirit of the impersonations now of Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves. Let's talk to Dan Hodges, though, who's here waiting patiently to discuss the great many variety of stories we've got this morning. Dan, very good morning to you.
Morning.
I mean, it's been a weird week, hasn't it? You know, I never thought when I came in on Monday morning that I'd be talking about chicken nuggets, llamas, and now a Chinese woman from the Chinese Communist Party who seems to have been a key figure in making sure that the International Court of Justice told us to sell off the Chagos Islands.
I don't know why you're surprised, Mike. I think we kind of get this sort of stuff every week now, don't we? I mean, that's quite a run-of-the-mill sort of week. I was actually thinking it's quite sedate this week with all that stuff going on.
Well, of course, I haven't actually mentioned, you know, the big story of the week, which is the complete and utter sort of dereliction of duty by Andrew Gwynn and his WhatsApp group. You know, 11 councillors have now taken the fall, as well as Andrew Gwynn himself as Minister of Health, and now, of course, another MP too. You know, I mean, it's just the hits just keep on coming.
Yeah, on that one, I mean, obviously that was an excellent exclusive that we had in the Mail on Sunday. Yeah. I mean, I'm going to be honest with you. My starting point on this is, I, as a rule, I'm not especially keen on the idea of sanctioning people for historic comments they've made in what are essentially private.
I would say I agree with you on that.
And that, you know, that would be my starting point. The problem is with this story is threefold. Firstly, the nature of the comments on that group, which was shown to be homophobic, sexist, and indeed anti-Semitic.
Right.
Keir Starmer and the Labour Party have obviously said these are the sort of things that we need to crack down on, not just as a party, but as a society. Keir Starmer obviously said he was going to clean up his party particularly in relation to anti-Semitism. But here's I think the key thing. You know, and I know, and your viewers know, if this had been somebody from any other political party, it would have been Keir Starmer and the Labour Party who would have been leading the charge, saying they have to be shown the door.
Yeah.
This is the point. The Labour Party are consistently aggressive and pious in relation to this. We must have zero tolerance of anything that is even remotely can be associated with racism, sexism, or any of the other isms.
Right.
So in this sense, whilst I normally would have sympathy, you know, it's the question of consistency and double standards.
Yeah. And I think, actually, the thing that really stuck in the craw, certainly of the people who watch and listen to this show, was the complete and utter disdain in those comments, not least whether they were anti-Semitic or sexist or misogynistic or whatever, but it was just disdain for the voters generally. And, I mean, that's the worst sort of result that Keir Starmer can have, because it led to people like me having conversations about, is this what they really think of us? Is this what they really think of you? Is this what they really think of you know, the sort of the great unwashed that basically we can wish them dead. We can hope that the pensioners don't have any influence whatsoever. We don't care about them. You know, that to me anyway, to the general population, it was far more damaging than any of the isms that you talk about.
Yeah, I mean, my own view is if it comes to you know, the electorate being disillusioned, then Keir Starmer's doing a pretty good job of that on his own. He doesn't need Andrew Gwynn to help him. So. And again, you know, let's be honest. Distasteful though the comments were, you know, they were in the context of a private social group, a private social media group, and people in those on those groups say things and joke about things that they obviously they don't really mean. But as I said, for me, the issue is the consistency and, as I say, the piety and the self-righteousness that we consistently have from the Labour Party, Labour politicians, and the condemnation that is poured on any of their opponents when in any context they're seen to be doing a similar thing.
Yeah, absolutely right. Let's move on to the great story in the Mail today, which I don't know, they don't call it an exclusive, but this is Labour's choice for the next Borders watchdog, a guy called John Tuckett, who I've never come across before, don't know him, don't know where he's come from, 73 years of age, apparently preferred candidate, basically says in a confirmation hearing in front of MPs that he's a resident of Finland and his plan is to work from home if he gets the job in Finland.
I mean, I just don't understand it. I mean,
what's wrong with them? It's kind of like, don't you think somebody would have called him to one side and said, look, we're going to give you this big job and it'll pay 130,000 quid, and we know you live in Finland, but I'm afraid you're going to have to commute. You're going to have to, if you want to stay there at the weekends, you're going to have to fly in on a Monday morning or Sunday night and go home on a Friday. You know, it's not difficult. You can do it. People do it all the time.
The thing that I find remarkable about this more than anything else is actually, we talk every week about the latest sort of policy disaster and screw up by the government.
Yeah.
Firstly, from Keir Starmer down, people within the Labour Party and the government understand the importance of getting to grips with the immigration crisis. They understand. They may not instinctively like the idea of tough borders, but they at least understand the politics of it.
Yeah.
And Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, especially understands the politics of this. And in fairness to Yvette Cooper, and I'm perfectly happy to criticise Keir Starmer and ministers, she, I think, is actually very, very slowly, and it's very early days, she's actually starting to demonstrate, she's starting to make some progress. So we had figures this week showing that deportations under the Labour government are increasing, and are increasing at quite a significant rate. We've seen in other areas they are starting to have some sort of success in targeting the gangs, bringing people across under the small boats, although obviously there's still a lot of work to be done. So what I don't understand is how this happened.
Yeah.
I don't understand, given the focus on immigration, the focus on prioritising it, this was allowed to occur. It just,
right. But again, it's a lack of. It seems to me it's a lack of attention to detail. Almost, it's not even a political error. It's not anything other than just somebody not fully understanding that if you're putting someone up for a job. I mean, look at the processes they go through in America. Where Donald Trump's appointing people right, left, and centre to head massive departments. Giving responsibilities, but they have to be approved by the Senate. Now, you'd have to believe that, if nobody in their right mind in the United States would walk into a Senate confirmation hearing and say something like, actually, I'm going to work from Mexico. I mean, that's effectively what's going on. That wouldn't happen, and it shouldn't happen here.
But, I mean, yeah, but yes, and the key thing is, we have the working from home debate, and we talk about, work-life balance, etc., the post-COVID working environment. And I think there may well be certain jobs and certain roles and certain sectors where that may be appropriate. I cannot for the life of me understand how anyone would believe that a role of this nature is something that can be done from Finland.
Yeah.
I mean, I just, how does, again, I find
it's sort of mind-boggling, isn't it? It's baffling. It's almost like, you have a checklist. Even if you only had a checklist of 5 things, the person that you're nominating to do a job, if it was me, for example, saying, I've got this great idea, I'm going to go to the bosses and say, look, I want to hire a new producer, and then when the new producer turns up for an interview, they go, actually, I was hoping I could work from home, and I live in Northern Ireland. You'd be like, what are you talking about? Why are you doing that?
So if you are recruiting somebody for this role, you obviously want them to have the competence and the skills, but you also want a bit of commitment and a bit of passion from them, and a bit of, I want to get in there and really get to grips with this and really get on top of this issue. And if you then say to them in the interview, that's good.
Yeah.
Does this commitment extend to actually working from the UK in this role?
What are the chances?
No. Then it's like, well, okay, thank you very much for your time.
Yeah.
We're going to go down another route.
Right.
I mean, just surely that anyway.
I know, it's mad. Let's just finish off with a bit of Rachel Reeves, front page of the Telegraph today. Rachel Reeves has wiped out the £9.9 billion headroom that she left herself to borrow and may now be forced to raise income tax to cover any future shocks. This is coming from a bunch of economists at the National Institute of Economic and Social Research. I mean, things are definitely going from bad to worse. We've got April on the horizon, where companies who are already complaining that they can't hire anyone, they can't afford it, are going to be paying out more money on national insurance. And the latest forecast now suggests that we are going to be in a pretty bad place come the middle of April.
Yeah, and I think now this is, again, we've talked about a lot of messes, a lot of screw-ups by the government. This is not just another screw-up, though. This is now becoming a serious strategic problem for Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves. And for this reason, I'm talking about the politics here for a second, never mind, because we all know the sort of the gloomy economic scenario. We all know the impact the budget had on the business productivity, etc. I remember coming on when the budget was on, and I said to you, look, they did have hard choices. There was a gap. There was a black hole. They did have a choice. Public services, as we know, were teetering on the brink. They had a choice. They had to put short-term investment in. They didn't have a huge amount of room to borrow. The choice was taxes on business, taxes on hard-working British people. They went for taxes on business. You may not like it, but it was a defensible policy.
Yeah.
What happened 2 weeks ago is, and the line from government is, we have to protect public services. What happened 2 weeks ago is they suddenly threw that out the window, and they said, Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer said, no, forget all that. Our priority now is growth. So the political prism through which Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves' economic policies must now be judged, because they established the prism, is, are their policies generating growth? And as you've pointed out, it is quite clear that for month after month after month moving forward, we are not going to be experiencing growth.
No.
We are experiencing a downgrading of growth forecasts, a gradual slowing down of the economy, a gradual increase in unemployment, and basically, as you said, a gradual loss of headroom in relation to the capacity to borrow, with maybe the requirement for further tax cuts. But that is the decision that Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves has made. They have said, judge us almost solely on our capacity to grow the economy.
Yeah.
And if that is the metric by which we should judge them, then quite
well,
obvious,
that's what we're going to do.
Their economic strategy is a disaster.
It is.
Because and as I said, if they were wanting to say, we had to make hard choices, we had to protect public services, we had to protect hardworking British people from personal rises in personal taxation, fine. But if you then say, forget all that, the key thing we need to do is grow the economy, and then you turn around and say, well, you're not growing the economy,
Right.
you're the economy quite clearly.
Exactly. And if they're going to put up income tax, exactly how are they going to make that happen? How are they going to make that work without, distressing, shall we say, for want of a better word, even more people?
Well, but also there's an even more basic point. You can have a philosophical economic debate about, you can talk about Laffer curves and all the rest of it. The simple reality is, and every single person from wherever they sit on the political spectrum knows this, anybody who's done, back in my day, O-level economics knows, if you want to grow an economy, you cannot impose 40 billion pounds of tax cuts on business and then say, oh, and by the way, we may have to impose additional tax cuts. Now, I understand there are competing priorities, and I understand there are difficult choices, but the choice we are now being told that Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves have opted for is to prioritise growth. So if they want to prioritise growth, they cannot continue to pile taxes on British business.
No, exactly. It's complete madness.
And I dislike this, this sort of Rachel from accounts thing. I think a lot of it is misjudged. But the reality is,
But if she ran the accounts department, like she's running the exchequer, the accounts department would be in a pretty bad way.
Well, but I don't understand how we are supposed to assess Rachel Reeves' competence as Chancellor if she's continuing to insist she wants growth, but she also wants to pile £40 billion plus taxes on the British economy.
It doesn't compute. It doesn't compute. Absolutely. Listen, we've got to run. Dan, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Dan Hodges there from the Mail on Sunday. Coming up, we're going to be talking about prisons, because guess what? Prisoners are being sent back to jail because according to the probation service, it's better than keeping them out of jail because they can't watch over them. What did we tell you? We told you that, did we not? This is Talk.
I know what you're going to say, yeah.
Labour has just suspended Burnley MP Oliver Ryan, the party, over his membership of that WhatsApp group that contained offensive comments. The comments were homophobic, misogynistic, racist and anti-Semitic as well. Your response to that quickly, Harry?
I think, he was sort of in trouble from the moment he woke up this morning. I think this was a matter of time, and right on cue, just as the papers are starting to file for deadline, Labour have moved.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 7:25. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until, of course, 10 o'clock. Marco says this: I'm no economist, but surely wouldn't it be a good idea to uncover the vast amount of hidden treasure we have in the North Sea, pay off the national debt, get ourselves into a positive economical position before giving away stupid and vast amounts of cash and territory overseas? Well, I mean, you heard Dan Hodges there talking about how, the growth problem is going to be a problem, and a continuing problem for Rachel Reeves, because she doesn't really have a clue as to how to make growth happen. And the bottom line is, if you don't know how to make growth happen, the one thing that you will certainly not make happen is growth. Because if you can't do it, you won't do it. And if you keep spending money in the way that they are, and pretending that we haven't got any money, like, for example, on the Chagos Islands, 18 billion quid so far they've promised, it's just not going to work, is it? It's as simple as that. 0344 499 1000. Let's talk to Vanessa Frake, former prison governor, because a story that came across our desk today is about the probation service, which, of course, we said many months ago is under extreme pressure. They have real problems taking care of all the people they're supposed to keep an eye on. But then more and more people started to get released from prison, and more pressure got put on the probation service. And now they're basically saying, send them all back to prison. For heaven's sake. Vanessa, very good morning to you. Hi, Vanessa. I can't hear you. I don't know whether you're in some way... Or can I hear you?
Good morning.
Oh, there you are. Sorry. Yeah, prisoners being sent back to jail because it's the easiest thing to do, according to the probation service. Well, I mean, we could have told you that, and we did tell you that, I think, way back when they started letting people out of prison. I don't know whether the prison release scheme is still ongoing, but, you know, we knew it wouldn't really work.
Well, I think there's a number of contributing factors to this. You know, in the past 3 years, the number of recalls has almost doubled from just over 13,000 to nearly 26,000. Yeah. But out of those, you know, they didn't commit further crime. They were just sent back to prison for non-compliance to licence conditions, sort of, you know, not turning up for probation appointments, right, etc., etc. Yeah, it does seem like it's an easy option for the probation service. The problem is, of course, you know, with population pressures, with the early release scheme, with longer sentences, with the fact that now, since 2014, all prisoners who are released have to be monitored and supervised by probation, whereas before those serving less than 12 months didn't have to be. So, yeah, I mean, you know, Shabina Mahmood said last July she was going to invest in another 1,000 probation officers. But, of course, you know, that takes time. You know, for a probation officer, you know, it's just over 2 years training. So, you know, it's part of our broken justice system, unfortunately. But
that's the thing, because at the end of the day, apparently it says that now 15% of the total number of people behind bars are people who have been sent back in after they've been released. So there's clearly a problem, and you've always said this, Vanessa, with what happens when they're in there as well, because what they're not being encouraged to do is figure out how to stay away.
Yeah, and this all comes, you know, from you know, the prison services. Part of their job is to resettle prisoners, to reintroduce them back into the community, to become useful citizens and lead law-abiding lives. And you know, we know that our prison service fails drastically on that. We have the worst reoffending rates in Western Europe. Yeah. And again, you know, Mike, I can't say this enough. The bigger picture is how our prison system has been run into and our justice system for that matter, has been run into the ground.
Yeah, right. And is that system of sort of releasing them back into the community so that they can make room for more people, is that still going on? Is that still a thing, or has it been abandoned?
No, I think the 40% is still ongoing. It'll be interesting when the figures come out for the Labour government's early release scheme in September and October, where they released just over 5,000 prisoners, to see how many of those were recalled. And I think those figures come out in the next couple of months. So that'll be quite interesting to see how many were resettled and how many actually just turned around and got on that crime roundabout and went back in.
Because I don't know whether it's just the way that the media cycle works, but you know how when we're watching footage of all these prisoners getting released back in sort of back end of last summer, I suppose it was all we thought about for about a week or maybe 2 weeks, and then suddenly there was some more released, and you know, suddenly it all goes away again and everybody forgets about it.
Yes, and that is the way of the media, isn't it? You know, something else comes up that's far more important and much more interesting, and we do forget about it. But you know,
but it's also the way of the government as well, because nobody in government seems to be talking about it either.
No, I agree. It's all gone very quiet, but I would imagine they're waiting for some interesting reviews coming out. The Gork review, which allegedly is early spring, and that's the sentencing review. Yeah. And also I hear now Leveson is going to do a review. So there's a lot of reviews around. The most important
can't move for reviews, can you?
Well, no, absolutely. But the most important thing is so that something positive, you know, happens after the review.
Well, that would be nice, but I don't hold up much hope, I'm afraid. You know, there's a lot going wrong at the moment in this country.
I'm not holding my breath either, Mark.
No, I wouldn't. Vanessa Frake, good to talk to you, former prison governor, of course. Yeah, I mean, isn't it funny how we spent an awful lot of time last year talking about prisoner release and how dangerous it was and how ridiculous it was that they were releasing all these people. It now turns out that about half of them have probably gone back in now, and the probation service are basically admitting that they can't handle the numbers of people who are being let out of prison because they can't keep an eye on them and they don't know what they're doing. And then we wonder why we've got a lawless country. We wonder why crime is being committed at record levels, and we wonder why that's all happening. Nobody's putting the two things together, though, are they? We're releasing more crooks back into the streets and crime's gone up. Who could have predicted it? 0344 499 1000. Tony says this: the Labour Party are growing our population and our national debt. That's the two things they're growing. And Mick says, Mike, Labour seem to be playing at politics. They are well out of their depths. Well, coming up, we're going to speak to Rupert Lowe, MP for Reform UK, of course, in Great Yarmouth, because the story on the front page of the Telegraph is one that I'm sure he's got plenty to say about. And this is an immigration judge in this country, and we've got his name, and we don't know why he's done it, has basically given the green light to people from Gaza to come and live in Britain and settle here. Right, in the same way that we were supposed to be offering places and sanctions, sanctuary, I should say, to Ukrainians who were fleeing the war in Ukraine. That's not the way it's meant to work, is it? 0344 499 1000 is the number. You can send us a voice note to that number as well. You can text us at 87222, and of course, you can start your message with the word talk, and find us on X as well, at talkTV. This is Morning Glory.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham. It's 7:35. We're with you all the way through until 10 o'clock. Of course, coming up, we've got much going on, including Rupert Lowe, MP from Great Yarmouth, of course, Reform, one of the 5 Reform MPs, making an absolute ruinous nuisance of themselves in Parliament and doing a great job of kicking the various backsides in Westminster that need to be kicked. Let's get a quick voice note from Jay, who's got an update on GB Energy.
Mike, I've just seen the new energy czar, Mad Ed, and his trusty sidekick, the Prime Minister, otherwise known as Mr. Boring, and he was surrounded by Rachel Reeves. I think they've decided the best thing for GB Energy is to shove the witch on the fire, and they've guaranteed a good burn for 150 years.
Well, it's a bit unusual, slightly unorthodox, but thank you, Jay, for that. Let's talk to Rupert Lowe. The news this morning, which is reaching us ridiculously on the front page of the Daily Telegraph, is that basically Palestinian migrants have been granted the right to live in the UK after applying through a scheme which was originally created for Ukrainian refugees. And it's worse than that, because the scheme, which has been introduced here by Immigration Tribunal judge by the name of Hugo Norton-Taylor, right, at the end of the day, this is a guy who, in fact, has opened the floodgates now for anybody to come from any conflict zone to live in this country as long as they've got a relative that's already here. Rupert, very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike. How are you?
Very well indeed. Very good to see you. I mean, this is extraordinary, isn't it? I mean, as if we haven't got enough problems, let's invite a couple of million people in from Gaza, you know, half of whom might be members of Hamas.
Well, it's bonkers, Mike. And as you know, we've been trying to do our best, as you quite rightly said in the introduction, to hold our great government to account. But the problem is, I think that the general malign influences behind all this, for some extraordinary reason, seem to constantly have the wool pulled over their eyes. So, as you say, whether it's the distinction between an economic migrant and an asylum seeker, we give the benefit of the doubt to absolutely everybody. So, as a result, we had a meeting yesterday with Dame Angela Eagle because we've got whistleblowers who are coming forward telling us that the contracts for the management of these 218 hotels, which are given to a number of companies like Serco, as an example.
Yeah.
The contracts, we're being told by the whistleblowers, many of whom who work for the contractors, are not fit for purpose. So effectively, they weigh all the odds in favour of the contractor. And being running contracting businesses myself, if you get on the wrong side of a contract, then you can have your face taken off.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what's happening. So, for instance, we're seeing whistleblowers saying that hotels are being taken, they're not full, and yet the government's being charged as if they were full. That's for rooms, food, everything else. And then when the contract ends, they're having their faces taken off again for dilapidations.
Right.
So, I mean, that's just
so they're just not in control of it. Basically, they've taken a big package of money, given it all to Serco and said, you just get on with whatever it is. We won't check you to check you're doing the right thing. We won't be monitoring whatever you do. You just sign a couple of pieces of paper every week and then we'll be fine.
Well, that's right. And also what it does, Mike, is it allows them to hide behind the contractor. So if you say, are you paying for this? They can say, no, we're not. Well, the answer is that the contractor is on their behalf.
Yes.
So although they're not lying, you could say the spirit of the law has been broken, even if the letter of the law hasn't. So I think they're hiding behind deficient contracts, and it's just the same as the DWP. I mean, everywhere we look, the DWP is wasting money.
Yeah.
It's giving it to people who don't deserve it. There are people who deserve it, and they have to be looked after. But it's as if there is no respect for taxpayers' money. And the other side of the equation, of course, is that then the hard-working, honest, decent British people of Middle England who are working their backsides off increasingly for less and less.
Yeah.
Because as we bring more and more people into the country, those skilled people, so our GDP per capita is falling. So these people are having to work harder. There are small businesses, our farmers, our pensioners, all the people who are suffering here, and then being crunched by HMRC, because what's happening is, in order to try and close this gap, which I don't believe they're closing, I actually think our sort of national accounting system is probably a fraud now.
Yeah.
It's called Oscar 2, and if you miss off large chunks of liability, then effectively you misstate the accounts. So it's hard enough with a company to find out where the truth lies, as we know from Enron. So let alone a nation that's going off the rails.
Yeah.
And certainly from the information that I'm uncovering from the questions we're asking, which increasingly aren't being answered, I think that the actual sort of administration of the state is completely out of control. And not only is the civil service too big, it's just not working.
No, sure.
So,
well, when you see
I don't actually, Mike, think that the front bench ministers, most of whom who have no experience of business, I actually don't think they know the answers to these questions, and they're shocked themselves when they get them.
No, I mean, I don't think they've got any idea at all. I mean, when you see even what Elon Musk is uncovering, and in America, you'd like to have thought, I would have thought anyway, having spent a lot of time there, that there was less kind of what you might call woke wastage of money going to groups. But when we've seen what USAID have been doing, you know, billions, hundreds of billions of dollars going overseas, going to all sorts of weird countries and all sorts of weird projects. And you see that, you know, so if it's happening there, you can imagine if we had a similar kind of, you know, figure, and one of you guys could do what Elon Musk is doing, and I know you're trying, to sort of peer into the in the morass of accounting that's going on and discover how much waste there is. It would be quite extraordinary. But my other interest this morning in getting you on, Rupert, is to talk about the strength of the judiciary in this country, and the fact that lawyers like this, who have become, you know, independent tribunal judges on immigration, can actually alter the face of Britain by basically allowing all these people to come in, by allowing all these human rights lawyers to get their own way, and by preventing the will of the people, as it were, to protect our borders.
Well, you only have to look at people like Lord Hermer, Mike, who seems to be, you know, an apologist for what Britain has achieved over its history, which I'm very proud of. It appears that he and a raft of other people who now hold the levers of power are ashamed by what we've done, and they're trying to sort of self-flagellate us all. And I think you're quite right. Tony Blair and Gordon Brown, along with some other punters like, you know, Campbell, Mandelson and Derry Irvine, have laid loads of heffalump traps. They've actually undermined our Constitution. And as you know, they're responsible for the Supreme Court. And increasingly, the judiciary has gone woke. So, you know, I came across this the other day when, you know, on Twitter, somebody wrote something which was clearly defamatory. And as you know, I have a history of fighting libel trials and having my phones hacked by the media. I've fought some quite long court cases to win and sort that out. But now, would you go into bat knowing that behind it all is a woke judiciary who may well find that you have been defamed, but actually after huge legal costs would probably award you no damages. So it actually further undermines the whole basis of the rule of law, Mike. And you're quite right, it's very concerning. But again, you've got, with countries led by Keir Starmer, as I've said, probably the most duplicitous prime minister in history, a human rights lawyer. As we know, behind Tony Blair was Cherie Blair, a human rights lawyer. I think this human rights nonsense has just got completely out of control. And a bit like the legal profession, throughout history, every now and again, they get half a cut above themselves. And I think they're rather more than half a cut above themselves now. And you can't move without having a lawyer now, and that is basically clogging up the arteries of commerce, which has to stop.
Well, it is actually the most damaging thing that any society can be faced with, is too many lawyers, you know, absolutely unbelievable. Good to talk to you, Rupert. Thanks very much indeed. Rupert Lowe, fighting the good fight there on behalf of the people of this country, the Reform MP for Great Yarmouth. The problem here is that we've got so many levers of power which we can't operate. You know, it's all very well saying, oh, but we live in a democracy, you know, because every single 4 or 5 years you get to vote for who you want to run the country. Do you, though? Because Keir Starmer's not running the country, and if he is, he's running it very badly. The people who are really running the country are people like this immigration lawyer that we named a little bit earlier on. His name is Hugo Norton-Taylor, an upper tribunal judge in the immigration service, basically. And he has ruled that the Palestinians' appeal should be allowed because they can come to the UK on the basis of their Article 8 rights to a family life under the European Convention on Human Rights. All you need is one family member. And many Palestinians are already living here, which means that if you've got one family member living here, you can come and live here as well, because you've got a right to a family life. Well, what about those of us who want to have a right to a family life who are already living here, and we don't want to have all sorts of other people coming in who might cause us harm? Because let's face it, there are plenty of pieces of evidence to suggest that there's more than half of the Palestinian population who are not least supporters of Hamas. They might even be in Hamas. And we would be inviting them into this country? Like we don't have enough terror problems, we don't have enough terrorists. For heaven's sake, let's get a voice note on Stephen.
Good morning, Mike. You're completely missing the point about the new commander of Border Command or Border Force or whatever he's going to be. His job is to keep people out of the UK, and by keeping himself out, he will be 100% successful and a wonderful role model.
Stephen, thank you very much. That's, of course, John Tuckett, named as the government's preferred candidate for the role of the new border czar. He wants to work from home in Finland. Brilliant, isn't it? 7:46. Coming up next, we're going to talk to Sir Geoffrey Clifton-Brown, chair of the Public Accounts Committee. Maybe he knows where all the money's gone.
When you look at the number of rapes that are being reported, it's hugely gone up. To make these points in the toxic environment we now live in, you've got to give people data. So they can't turn around and go, you're making this up because you hate brown people. You're making this up because you're a xenophobe. You're making this up because you're an Islamophobe. You need to actually say to people, here are the statistics. The Telegraph did a fantastic story where they had used prison population data from the year before. The only data available, women and girls are far less safe in Europe now as a direct consequence of mass immigration. And we have provided the evidence.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 7:50, 10 minutes to 8. We're here every single weekday morning from 6, of course, till 10. 4 glorious hours of Morning Glory. Julie Hartley-Brewer coming along at 10 o'clock. Morning, Mike, says Nicola from Norfolk. Unusually sensible commentary from Dan Hodges this morning. That was a bit earlier in the hour. However, he still doesn't seem to understand that the choice the government made to tax business rather than hard-working people was still a tax on hard-working people. Well, that's the problem. And we're going to talk about tax with Sir Geoffrey Clifton-Brown, MP, chair of the Public Accounts Committee, because, of course, wouldn't you know it, not content with taxing us up the wazoo, HMRC are complaining that there's too much tax dodging going on. So, Geoffrey, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike. Good to be on the programme again.
Thank you very much indeed. It's good to see you. I mean, it's like the sort of the beast in the corner of the room that can never be satisfied with, no matter how much food you give it. It just wants more. HMRC got a bit of a cheek talking about tax dodging, haven't they? I mean, surely they should go after the people who criminally tax dodge, and they should leave the rest of us alone.
Well, they are, is the answer, but they're not doing it sufficiently. Our report makes clear that there is around about £5.5 billion that is evaded or deliberately not paid by taxpayers,
right,
and that the Inland Revenue are not really sufficiently curious as to where that money is not being paid. And we've been criticised for that figure. But let me tell you what it's based on. It's based on the Inland Revenue's own calculations.
Right.
They don't know totally what the amount of tax dodged is, but they say that is the figure that they estimate. It could be up, it could be down. But what we do know is that what we've been pushing for is all these firms that bring stuff in from abroad have been avoiding their tax, and we pushed for a change in the law for these online marketplaces.
Right.
And that has yielded £1.5 billion, and that's 5 times more than the original HMRC estimate. So if they underestimated that, they're probably underestimating the amount of tax that's not paid.
Yes.
So this is a really serious matter.
I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, one of the things that I'm told that you've highlighted is VAT registration processes, for example, are far too open to abuse. I mean, I pay VAT with my business, and, you know, if I miss a payment or if I fail to make the payment on time, I get hammered with a fine. So, I mean, how is it that that law-abiding citizens like me end up getting treated badly? But if you want to be a dodgy character and register yourself for VAT on a lesser amount or something like that, you get away with it.
So this is the whole thrust of our report, Mike. The Inland Revenue are going over are chasing the easy targets. But the more sophisticated scams, like those that we call phoenixism, who are registering companies, then dissolving them, going into a new company and avoiding their debts, and doing this several times in a row, is one of the ways which those that are determined to avoid their debts do so. And what we are really saying is that the Inland Revenue obviously needs to tighten up on this, but there needs to be a more combined effort by Inland Revenue, Companies House, who have no mechanisms of verifying where a company actually is, even if it does exist,
right,
and the Insolvency Service. They need to get together, they need to have proper data, work together, and try and collect some of this more difficult to collect money that isn't being paid to the Inland Revenue at the moment.
Right. And have you been able to identify where most of these miscreants are, in terms of whether they're companies, whether they're individuals, whether they're foreign nationals? What are they?
They are a mixture of all of those,
right,
but I think there's a particular loophole around companies actually forming themselves, then dissolving, and then reforming themselves. That's one particular loophole we identified.
Right. And I mean, given the number of, shall we say, focuses at the moment on tax, because we're seeing just in the Telegraph this morning that Rachel Reeves is likely to put tax up even more. I mean, potentially, for a government that's as desperate for money, you'd think they'd be much better at chasing after it.
Well, the government, she in her last budget did give the Inland Revenue an extra 640 million, and they reckon that they should be able to recoup an extra 6.4 billion. So the government themselves recognise there is all this money out there that isn't being collected by HMRC, and it's up really to the government. They have the power to do this, combined with HMRC, to go after these people and make sure the tax is paid.
Well, you would think so, wouldn't you? Because we are under immense financial pressure, it would appear, according to economists, that the financial headroom that Rachel Reeves did have, she no longer has. And so there's a pretty good likelihood that when she makes her speech in March, their sort of budget statement for whatever it's going to be called, there's going to be more taxes put on, and it's likely to be income tax, which, of course, they promised not to put on.
I've always said, Mike, and I maintain this really strenuously, that the last budget, which put up taxes and did so much damage to our businesses, national insurance, taking so much money out of our businesses, which they don't have to invest. But I've always said that tax increases in the last budget are only the first instalment. I can tell you there will be many instalments to come if this government can't balance their books better.
Yeah.
They're basically spending too much.
Well, they're spending too much because they're giving money away to all the wrong people, aren't they? They're giving it to anyone who works in the public sector. They all got a pay rise as soon as they walked in the door into Downing Street. And they're now apparently planning to spend upwards of 18 billion, if you believe Nigel Farage, could be 52 billion, by giving away the Chagos Islands. It turns out, we found out last night, that one of the people who ordered us to give the Chagos Islands away is a former member of the Chinese government. And a member who now sits on the board of the International Court of Justice.
Well, I think that actually giving the Chagos away is one of the most daft things you could possibly do.
Yeah.
Not only is it economically illiterate, but actually it's giving away a vitally strategically important base. And if somebody like the Chinese were to get into the Chagos and establish their own base, this would be really serious from a security point of view. So I think, I just sometimes think that this government need to really, really examine what they're doing, because it's not sensible.
Well, it certainly isn't sensible. I mean, we examine what they're doing every day, and I haven't found anything sensible in about 8 months. Thank you very much indeed. But listen, good to talk to you. It's Geoffrey Clifton-Brown, MP, Chair of the Public Accounts Committee. So it turns out that not only is the government spending too much money, not only is it giving money away which it shouldn't be doing, it's also not collecting the tax revenue from the people who owe money, and instead they're coming after the sort of legitimate people like the rest of us who do things by the book. It's absolutely shocking. Let's get a voice note from Tim. No, we can't get a voice note from Tim. Never mind. On the subject of the new Borders chief, his name is John Tuckett, right? Regarding your potential new border fast leader, says Jeff in Bedford, are you pronouncing his surname correctly? And one from Steve, who says maybe Keir Starmer is fed up with the press always rhyming his name with disasters, so he has appointed Mr Tuckett to give him some respite. I see what you did there, both of you. Very clever, very funny. I think we can now have the voice note from Tim.
Morning, Mike. Tim from Devon. I think Starmer should wear a lampshade on his head as the lights are on, but no one's at home.
Very good. I like that. And the lights are on indeed, and nobody is home. Darren from Barking says, in reference to being unable to deport people due to Article 8 of the ECHR, if social services can be exempt from this to remove children from their families, then why can't the Home Office be similarly exempt to be able to remove the parents? Well, I don't see why not. I mean, the problem is that this ridiculous ruling, and we're going to talk about it coming up with John Rentoul, chief political commentator from The Independent. The ridiculous notion that somehow we, as a nation, have to be kind of a sanctuary state for anybody in any conflict zone in the world, whether they're in Gaza, whether they're in Afghanistan, whether they're in Eritrea, whether they're in South Sudan. Basically, we have to allow them to come and live here and settle in this country for the rest of their lives, as long as they've already got a family member here. And what we do know as well is that an awful lot of people who come here illegally will say that they've got family members here in order to get into the country. And mostly nobody really knows if they do. But if loads of people arrive on a dinghy in Dover today and they all claim that they've got family members here, that's why they've come, then the situation just perpetuates itself. And that, for me, is absolutely and utterly ridiculous, isn't it? Dorothy from East Kilbride says this. Good morning, Mike. The government cannot say they are governing for the nation. They are putting British citizens at risk by allowing undocumented immigrants free rein. As for our judicial system, they are applying laws intended for post-war times. We must now leave the ECHR as it is no longer fit for purpose. Quite right, too. That's exactly what we should be doing. Coming up in the next hour, John Rentoul's here. We'll talk to the Shadow Housing Minister Paul Holmes as well. This is Morning Glory. See you.
I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
I have just returned from Buckingham Palace to form the next government of this great nation.
Take a look at what happened. I immediately knew it was very serious, that we were under attack.
The time has come, and this surely is crunch time. Williams who scores, and Spain lead. A shot from distance is in. It is Cole Palmer. Low ball in, Oivamo slides it in.
An absolute killer of a goal.
I agree with the protest, but I don't think the violence was anywhere near necessary.
No, I mean, I don't think anyone, Nigel, would ever think that the violence was the answer at all.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in, they're eating the cats.
Liberal left couldn't understand that this man could be anything other than the great newsreader, a man of integrity.
Is it possible in any way, shape or form that Keir Starmer didn't know about these facts about the suspects in Southport?
I find it extraordinary that he wouldn't know. It seems that the public has not been told the truth.
No, there's nothing.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 2 minutes past 8. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock, of course. There's lots going on this morning, lots of immigration-related stories. Front page of the Daily Telegraph, the court in an immigration tribunal in the name of Hugo Norton-Taylor, an upper tribunal judge, has basically given permission for Gazans to settle in the UK by rights, not because we are feeling sorry for them and not because they can come here temporarily like the Ukrainians could, but no, this is if they've got members of their family already here, which many of them do, that they can basically have a right under Article 8 of the European Convention on Human Rights to come and live here permanently and settle in the United Kingdom. Absolutely ridiculous, isn't it? Completely and utterly mad, because we wouldn't even know, because of course the hapless immigration department in this country would have no clue how many of the people coming from Palestine would be signed up members of Hamas. Because what we do know is there's an awful lot of sympathisers of Hamas in Palestine, and we've seen exactly what happened when they released the hostages. I really think this is one of the most ridiculous ideas anybody's ever had. Meanwhile, Labour are looking for a new border czar, right? His name is John Tuckett, 73 years of age. He's the preferred candidate for the role. He was at a confirmation hearing yesterday in front of several MPs, and he revealed that he doesn't actually live in Britain. He's a resident of Finland, and he's an advocate of working from home. So here we have the new border boss who wants to work from home from a foreign country, i.e. Finland, but he thinks he can control our borders better from there. I mean, has the world gone completely and utterly stark, staring mad? Absolutely incredible. Meanwhile, we found out that one of the people involved in making the decision to advise Britain to sell off the Chagos Islands is in fact an ex-Chinese government official, member of the Chinese Communist Party, and somebody who would very much like to see China benefit from the sale of those same islands. We've also got a woman who can't be deported back to Grenada because she married a bloke from Latvia, and apparently he thinks it's a bit too hot in the Caribbean for him, so he doesn't want to go. I mean, you just don't know where to stop, really, do you? You don't know where to start, even. Lord Harmer, otherwise known as Lord Hermer, also, it turns out, is on the front pages again, because once again, he's got himself into the hot water because he's backed a guy called Phil Shiner, one of the most disgraced lawyers in the history of the legal business in this country. He claimed all sorts of war crimes were being committed by British soldiers. They were all rejected by the High Court because it turned out he made them all up. Details of Hermer's professional relationship with Shiner, who is a former human rights lawyer and convicted fraudster, is going to put further pressure on his position in Sir Keir Starmer's government. I'm saying Hermer, the Harmer, will be out of work in the Attorney General's office by Easter. 0344 499 1000. We'll talk to John Rentoul. Sam Carlyle's written a column in The Sun as well about assisted dying. We'll get to that too. Let's get a voice note from Ivor.
Labour are now the grown-ups in the room.
I'm a llama.
Yeah, absolutely right. I mean, we're not talking chicken nuggets, we're not talking llama. This is a serious show for serious people. Let's get it on. Although perhaps we should start, before we talk to John Renton, about some levity which was brought into the House of Commons yesterday by Lee Anderson, who decided to ask Wes Streeting, the Secretary of State for Health, a question.
Lee Anderson. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now, the new Health Minister has stated that it's OK for a human being to present as a llama. So what I want to know is, if I have a family member who presents as a llama, suddenly becomes ill in the middle of the night, do they send for a doctor, a vet, or a straitjacket?
Mr. Speaker, I can just say to the honourable member that my honourable friend, the Minister for Public Health, believes in treating every human being with the dignity and respect they deserve, even the honourable gentleman.
Wes Streeting playing a bit of a straight bat there to Lee Anderson, but quite a funny moment. John Renton's here, Chief Political Commentator at Independent. John, very good morning to you.
Good morning. I've failed in my investigative duties, Mike, because I haven't looked into that llama story. I mean, I assume she was joking, was she? But
well, I don't know.
It's
hard to tell. I think the trouble is that people who come from that sort of area where you can be identifiable as anything that you wish to be identifiable as would probably say that she wasn't joking. You know, like in Scotland, we've had children being encouraged to identify as wolves. You know, identifies cats. We've got sort of all manner. You know, she wants gender-neutral toilets. She doesn't want anyone to have to go to a female or a male toilet. She believes that women can have a penis. You know, it's all that same kind of nonsense where people can go, well, you can be anything you like, and we must respect you.
Well, I think there are different levels of nonsense, and I think llama is clearly beyond a certain line.
Yes, I mean, I have to say, I did not expect, and as I say it to you probably every week now, I did not expect to come into work on Monday morning and be confronted with a story about chicken nuggets. Neither did I expect to come in on Tuesday to be confronted with a story about llamas. Today's actually relatively boring. Because apart from old Lord Hermer and his newfound fame on the front page of the Times today, because he's mates with that ghastly guy called Phil Shiner, who has been completely and utterly, castigated, discredited, and called one of the worst lawyers in the history of the law, and a convicted fraudster to boot. I mean, this surely must mean that Hermer's days are numbered, mustn't it?
Well, I'm not sure if Richard Hermer was acting for Phil Shiner in a legal capacity, in which case, he's just doing his job as a lawyer. The question is whether he's a friend of Phil Shiner.
Well, it looks from the story
what he said about Phil Shiner's misdoings.
Yes, well, it looks from the story that it wasn't so much a legal relationship, but he issued a robust defence of him, and he also
before he was found out.
But he also greenlit an infamous press conference at which Shiner and another solicitor aired claims which were later found to be false about the killings and the torture of British soldiers. I mean, even if you gave him the benefit of the doubt, he was kind of, shall we say, not discouraged, and he was certainly convinced by this guy Shiner that he was going down the right track.
Well, a lot of people were, I'm afraid, including my own newspaper. I mean, the Independent gave a lot.
Well, that doesn't surprise me either.
Was as part of its campaign against the Iraq War.
Yeah.
I'm afraid it gave too much credence to people.
And the problem, and that is the problem, isn't it, with media companies and also with lawyers and sometimes with other politicians, is that if it's their cause, they don't really care who's in it. You know, as long as it sort of suits the narrative that, we're against the war in Iraq, so therefore we must be able to prosecute some British troops because they must have certainly been involved in war crimes. You know, it turns out that wasn't true.
Absolutely. I'm afraid... I'm struggling to disagree with you again, Mike.
Excellent.
Your list of, those immigration decisions that you started this segment with. Obviously, all of them I disagree with. Gazans coming here as on a scheme intended for Ukrainians is plainly wrong.
Right.
And the idea that you can't be deported to Albania because your son doesn't like chicken nuggets is...
It's bonkers, isn't it?
You know, that's got to be reversed as well.
Well, it has to. And I think one of the things that this is focused on as well is the sort of power that a lot of these immigration judges seem to have, because they're the sort of final arbiters of these decisions as to whether somebody can go. And these are cases that the Home Office is actually appealing. So they're going against even the orders and the wishes of the Home Office, which is not exactly, a fascist organisation, is it?
No, but that is what the legal system is there for. You don't want the government to have untrammeled power, and people are entitled to go to law. But using this right to family life under the European Convention on Human Rights has obviously gone too far, and something needs to be done about it.
Right.
I mean, I'm not sure if this may well be British law, and nothing to do with the European Convention, except that the European Convention principles were incorporated into British law by the Blair government.
Right.
But that is something that needs to be looked at and went too far.
Yeah, I think there's no question at all about that. Because we'll come back to that in a minute, and we'll talk to you as well about this law, which might allow Jerry Adams to claim damages in the sort of millions and millions and millions of pounds, which again I think people will find very distasteful indeed. But if I can just ask you to hold on there for a second, John, because we've got the Shadow Housing Minister down in Westminster, Paul Holmes MP, who wants to have a quick word. So we'll just go quickly to him and find out what he's got for us. Paul, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
We've been talking this morning, Paul, about the situation regarding immigration. Got this story in the Telegraph today about people from Gaza who are now apparently going to be given permission to come and settle in the United Kingdom for good. I mean, I've got two questions for you. One, if that is the case, is this not a complete and utter betrayal of anything that we've ever seen before in terms of our performance in controlling our own borders? And two, if it is something that's going to happen, how will we tell whether these people coming from Palestine are in Hamas or not?
Well, it's stupid, isn't it, quite frankly, and it's another story over the last few days where judges and the judiciary just are not in lockstep with the British people, and they don't represent, or they're not acting for the British people. They need to back away, actually. The government and Parliament decide who comes into this country. The government has a right to say to judges, look, we've set up these schemes, these are the way in which the letter of the law should be followed. It's not for you to start interpreting what the meaning of that law is. The Ukrainian visa scheme was very clear. It was a situation at the time for the Ukrainian war for people to come here, quite rightly. The way in which now the second-tier judges are allowing this law to be interpreted in what I think is quite a disgraceful way is unacceptable. So they should step back, and the government needs to strengthen the law and actually make very clear to the judges that they need to step away and back off. On your second point, you're absolutely right. Okay, look. If we're going to start opening schemes to any old Tom, Dick and Harry that can come into this country with a scheme that's meant to be specific for a certain country, then how are we going to do the checks and balances? And it's ridiculous. The Home Secretary and the Justice Secretary need to step up very quickly, because, Mike, what's going to happen, right? We've already got people in this country who are very frustrated about the laws of the land being taken granted of by those that are, quite frankly, just trying to get through. And they're going to be even more angry now. So we need strong action from the government, and that's what we'll be calling for.
Well, right, because if the people coming here are in Hamas, I mean, that's actually a clear and present danger to the people of this country. One just final question for you, Paul, about housing. It was said by Jackie Smith yesterday, Skills Minister, that basically we don't have enough construction workers to build all the homes that Labour are promising to build by Angela Rayner's plan over the next 3 years. So she's more or less said we're not going to hit the targets. What's the point?
Well, Angela Rayner likes to band about figures, but actually what we've seen is this £350 million announcement will only deliver 250 council houses across the whole of the United Kingdom. Jackie Smith is right. We are not going to meet that target. The target of 1.5 million homes shoves houses in the more rural areas where they're not needed and reduces housing targets in the cities where social houses, ironically, are most needed. We're not going to see those numbers go through, not only because of the skills shortage that Jackie Smith outlined, but also because of the actions of the budget that this government brought forward. How can house builders and developers build the houses we need if they're being clobbered with taxation, which means that they're on their balance sheet, they're not going to be able to spend the investment that they need to deliver the houses that people out there need? This isn't going to work. It's another example of tinkering around the edges and a gimmick, and we are not going to see the 1.5 million houses that this government's promised over the next 5 years.
Paul Holmes, thank you very much indeed. Shadow Housing Minister there, Conservative MP. Let's go back to John Rentoul. John, sorry to interrupt you there. We just had to have a quick detour down there. While we mentioned...
It's always interesting to hear from a Conservative trying to explain why they didn't change the law over the past 14 years.
I know. It's almost like a sort of collective bout of amnesia, isn't it? Let's talk about Angela Rayner a little bit, though, because I don't know if you saw her on Laura Kuenssberg on Sunday morning, but much was made of the fact that she said that she didn't recognise the characterisation of her in that book, Get In, where it was said that she had apparently said about Keir Starmer he couldn't run a bath. She didn't deny saying it, and it struck me that she's been quite clever with the way that she denies these things, because she's kind of going, well, I don't recognise that, I don't remember saying that. Lots of things are said. We don't always agree on everything. I mean, there's clearly a bit of trouble between those two, isn't there?
Oh, clearly. I think it's the sort of the Blair and Brown relationship of this government, because Angela Rayner does not hide her belief that she could do Keir Starmer's job better than he could. Right. You only have to look at her face at Prime Minister's questions. I shall be watching her closely.
She was looking pretty grim last week.
She was, but there's always this suspicion when you look at her. She manages to keep a very straight face, but there are occasional flickers, and you just think she's sitting there thinking, I could do that. Yeah. Keir Starmer's got to watch out, because she's the one member of his cabinet who's really got the oomph and the desire for the job.
Yeah.
And will strike if he stumbles.
And she's clearly got the support as well, because one of the things that the book points out is that when he tried to fire her or demote her after the Hartlepool by-election in 2020, I think it was.
21,
sorry. She basically refused to go. Stormed out of his office and called him all sorts of rather colourful names, I would imagine.
And went to the pub.
And then went to the pub and got her mates...
And turned her phone off.
Got her mates in the unions to start doing a bit of lobbying on her behalf, and the next thing you knew, she actually got promoted.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, she showed she's got some political muscle.
Yeah.
And that she can't be taken lightly. But I mean, this is for the future. I mean, I think that you got to remember the Blair Brown situation went on for 10 years.
Yeah. Well, it's still going on. I mean, I mentioned to you last week, didn't I, that Tony Blair made that comment about when he was also in the book. At least he's not a nutcase like Gordon Brown.
Exactly, and he said very similar words to Angela Rayner, but he said he he denied using that language. That's right.
Yes.
Whereas Angela Rayner said she didn't recognise.
Yes.
That language. I mean, what that means is, they said something like it, but not, maybe not those precise.
They didn't actually use those words, but they basically said the same thing. Yeah. Let me just finish up on the assisted dying bill, because we're going to talk to Sam Carlisle, who's written a column in the Sun today about it. A lot of disquiet, shall we say. I know you've been tweeting about this story, so I assume you care about what happens to it. A lot of disquiet about this kind of doing away with the assurances that were given in the first reading that there would be a judge involved in all decision making. It now turns out that it won't be a judge, it will be a panel. And so a lot of people are saying this is a complete betrayal of what they said the safeguards were going to be, therefore it falls at the second reading.
Well, I'm opposed to the bill. I think it's a fundamental change in law, which is going to have some unintended consequences and not good ones. But I have to accept that the House of Commons did vote for this in November. By a fairly substantial margin, and I know a lot of the opponents of the bill are trying to talk up the chances of MPs changing their mind as a result of this U-turn in particular. But I think once MPs have made that decision in principle to go for the bill, they're going to stick with it. I mean, I know, yes,
but it's quite a fundamental change, though, isn't it? The fact that they're now saying the safeguards that were there aren't there.
Well, but everybody knew at the time, actually, in November when they voted for it, that the judge thing was unworkable. I mean, because judges do not have the time to start making decisions on life or death cases of this kind. I mean, there's already a huge backlog in the courts, and there was some lack of clarity in the bill about whether a judge would actually even look at the papers or whether it be looked at by some junior court official. So she's clarified that. We haven't seen the wording yet. But these so-called death panels are not going to they're not going to satisfy people who are already opposed to the bill.
No.
I'm not sure that it's going to change enough minds to stop the bill altogether.
Interesting. We shall see how that all works out. But John, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. John Rentoul, chief political commentator at The Independent. Mark in Selby says, Mike, funny how it's always kids who wish to identify as animals. Should I rock up to work insisting that I identify as, let's say, a koala bear? I would be clearing my desk long before the delivery of eucalyptus leaves arrived. These precious children should realise that this identification insanity will follow them throughout their working lives, if indeed they ever work. Their parents need a proper talking to, as do their teachers. I think that's right. And Chris in South Yorkshire says, get President Trump on the line and let him know that Britain is now open to take in the people of Gaza. He can then get on with his plan for a redevelopment of the Gaza Strip. Our country is in lawless chaos. May God have mercy on us. It is bonkers, isn't it? Completely and utterly crazy. I don't know how we got here. But I wish to hell we'd be able to get out of it at 100 miles an hour. Coming up, Sam Carlyle, columnist at The Sun, will join us to talk about the assisted dying bill and we'll find out exactly what is going on with that next.
Tories like you and Kemi Baker, although she was sound on this, to be fair, as a cabinet minister, you're saying how awful this is, how mad this is. It happened on your watch and you guys did absolutely bugger all to stop it.
Well, I'm not sure that's right, actually, but Tories like me, if you
what was wrong about what I said?
Because I was going to go on to say, if you can find any reference to me ever supporting the principle that somebody with a penis can go into women's prison or women's toilets.
Call them what they are. You allowed it to happen while you were in office.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's Mike Graham here. I'm with you all the way through until 10 o'clock. It's coming up to 25 minutes past 8 this morning. If you're trying to go out and about, it looks a bit murky again. It's a bit warmer this morning, I think, but still misty, sort of damp. Not really particularly spring-like yet, I'm afraid. There are no green shoots of recovery in any way, shape or form. We've got lots to do between now and 10 o'clock. Let's get a voice note from Melissa, first of all.
Morning, Mike. It's Melissa from Cambridgeshire. Mike, I just want to say, please make it make sense. Every morning I wake up and there's another disaster. I just don't know what to say or what to do anymore. If it wasn't for you, I think I'd cry. Thanks for making it bearable. Bye.
Melissa, I'll continue to try and make it bearable, and I'm sorry that you feel so down about it all. But, you know, sometimes out of the murkiness and out of the despair comes some kind of hope. There seems to be a lot of things not going right at the moment, but let's try and do what we can, which is to talk about them. We're going to talk to Sam Carlyle now, who's written a column in The Sun, page 10 today. The Right to Die bill, it says the headline, is like creating society-changing law with gaffer tape and string. And as I was saying to John Rentoul, yesterday we found out from Kim Ledbetter, the MP who's kind of masterminding this particular bill, that the original idea that every case would involve a judge making the decision as to whether somebody could be helped to die has gone out the window, and they've now decided we won't do that, which was one of the safeguards that other people wanted to see. Instead of that, they're now going to have some kind of panel. Sam, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
Thanks very much for talking to us. I know this is a particularly personal column for you, a personal issue for you as well, because you start the column with the words, "I'm watching my mum die slowly in the last stages of Alzheimer's disease," which must be awful for you, and I give you my sympathy, and I'm sure a lot of people's sympathy comes to you as well, because so many people go through this now in this kind of day and age, unfortunately. But I, like you, was rather shocked, I think, to discover that this idea of safeguarding by a judge is now just been sort of disbanded, and they've just gone, well, no, we can't really do that now, so we're not going to bother.
It's awful, isn't it? We woke up yesterday morning, the night before, we still thought that judges were going to rule on this, and then Kim Ledbetter announced, well, actually, no, they're too busy, which the judges had warned about already, and going to put together a panel that will decide on this. And the panel will be a social worker and a psychiatrist and a lawyer. And that, to me, just doesn't feel safe enough.
Well, it doesn't, because as you well know, as I well know, there are different kinds of lawyers, there are different kinds of social workers, there are different kinds of psychiatrists. You can get very good ones, but you can also get bleeding awful ones. And I mean, I don't know what the safeguard, I don't understand what...
Felt strongly about this.
Yeah. I don't know what measure they would use to if there was to be a panel discussion. I mean, what measure are they going to use to say yes or no?
Well, exactly. So the other reason that I felt strongly about this was because my daughter is disabled. So a lot of the decisions that are made about her throughout her life, she's now 23, have been made by anonymous panels.
Right.
And they very often, they never really understand my daughter. They never really understand, they never give a reason for their decisions. Quite often they make the wrong ones, and then you end up having to challenge. So I come up against this regularly. I know many come up against this regularly, and it doesn't work. And there's no accountability there either. So this really, really worries me, because this isn't some so serious, and it just feels, I mean, I just felt yesterday this isn't being taken seriously. This is not going to work.
No. And do you think that this change will affect the passage of the bill then? Do you think enough MPs will now go, actually, I'm not sure I should vote for this now that this safeguard isn't there?
I think it already has. We saw last night that Lee Anderson had changed, basing their initial vote to get this through the first reading on the fact that there was that safeguarding there. This isn't what they voted on. A lot of the MPs said that they would pass it through so that there was a proper debate at this stage. But as the safeguards are now being watered down, I feel that they will change their minds. Hopefully enough will change their minds to stop this going through.
Yeah, I think you might well be right. Let's see. Sam, thanks very much indeed for talking to us. Sam Carlyle there, writing in The Sun this morning about the plans to make assisted dying something that is legal, but the plans are putting the vulnerable at risk. according to Sam's piece in the Sun today. We'll be talking more about this coming up a little bit later on in the show, so we'll welcome your thoughts on it. One here from somebody who doesn't give a name, who says, if we are worried about judges making their own judgments on matters of immigration, why wouldn't you be equally worried about judges being the final arbiters on assisted dying? An expert committee seems a much more safe and sensible approach. Well, the difference between the two things is that on immigration, you know, there are clear and well thought through rules about immigration which are supposed to be adhered to. You're not supposed to be able to have some ridiculous human rights judge make a change to the law based upon the fact that somebody that they don't know should have a right to a family life, even though they have no clue what that would be. So it's a very different state of affairs, and I would have a lot more faith in a judge who was actually making a decision about somebody's life or death than I would about a judge who was making a political sweeping kind of change to the law because they think that Britain should be welcoming people into the country because that's what we should do. It's a very different issue. So that's why I think there is a reason to have judges involved in the assisted dying situation, whereas I don't think they should be involved in cases of immigration. I just don't think they should. 0344 499 1000 is the number. Coming up, we're going to be speaking to Marie van der Zyl, past president of the Board of Deputies of British Jews. But for right now, how do you fancy winning some money? It's competition time, and we're giving you a chance to win a whopping £25,000. So what do you need to do to get involved? All you have to do is text the word prize to 83338, or you can enter by post. It's as simple as that. Once again, to get involved, just text the word prize to 83338, or you can enter by post.
18 plus, UK excluding NI. Enter by SMS for £2 plus one standard network charge by 11 p.m. on March the 3rd, 2025. Or send your name, email and contact number to £25,000 cash competition, PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP, to arrive by 5 p.m. on March the 6th, 2025. This is a News Broadcasting Network promotion. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. Tom in Merseyside says, how do you prove someone in Palestine with no paperwork is or isn't related to someone who has already arrived in the UK with no paperwork? The implications of the system being abused are horrific. Well, exactly right. I mean, this is the thing. If, for example, the asylum seeker law was fit for purpose, it would be different to the way it is now operating, because when it was originally brought in, it was before there were smuggling gangs. It was before people came en masse in dinghies across the Channel. It was before people smuggled themselves into lorries and managed to get themselves into Britain illegally. You know, it wasn't based upon a criminal enterprise and a criminal gang mentality. It was all about people individually, actually genuinely seeking solace and seeking shelter and seeking sanctuary from a war zone. But it's not what it is anymore. You know, this idea that we're going to bring all these people in from Palestine because they might know somebody, as our last messenger said, who came here without any papers whatsoever. I mean, it's just complete and utter nonsense. It's 8:33. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Right. Welcome back to Morning Glory. This, of course, is the one place where you need to be. It's the home of Common Sense. It is the world headquarters, actually, of Common Sense. And I'm delighted to say we're now joined by the past president of the Board of Deputies of British Jews, Marie van der Zyl. Marie, good to see you.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much for coming in. An incredible sort of time to be Jewish, really, isn't it, in this country? I mean, I've seen things in the past sort of 16 months that I've scarcely believed, you know, from people parading in the streets of London with Hamas insignia, waving Islamic State flags, you know, calling for the death of Israel. £53 million later, spent on the police, you know. We're still in a terrible situation. You know, we all thought that the hostages coming out was a great thing. But it looks as though that's stalled now as well.
I think it's a very difficult time to be Jewish. You will have seen this morning the anti-Semitism figures have been published from the CST, and although there's a slight decrease of 18%, they're still the second highest in the history of recording the figures and show a really elevated, unacceptable level of anti-Semitism.
Yeah. Well, we saw, did we not, just in the past few days, even the Labour Party still has problems with their individual members, where, you know, Andrew Gwynn, the health minister, has been suspended from the party for making, amongst other things, anti-Semitic texts and messages on his WhatsApps, and you just think, what's wrong with you?
Well, I'm pleased that the action has been taken very swiftly, and I have to say that I feel that Keir Starmer kept to his word when he said he wanted to root out anti-Semitism in the party, and I sat on the anti-Semitism advisory board. But anti-Semitism in any political party is unacceptable, and I think Yvette Cooper's been extremely strong on that. She said yesterday there's no place in this country for anti-Semitism, not now and not ever, and she's had much more robust policing. Right.
And what about your own situation? What have you found over the course of the time since October the 7th, 2023? I mean, have you been shocked at things that have happened to you?
I'll tell you, I was shocked because the biggest increase in anti-Semitism in 2023 was on October the 10th, and that was only 3 days later. From my perspective, I did all I could in October 23. I went with Ronald Lauder to Qatar, and we met the Emir and the Prime Minister and the hostage negotiating team. I was shocked when I came back. I went on Question Time, and even there, one of the questions that I got was putting to me about the final solution. It's unbelievable. At that time, all those people that were literally slaughtered, raped, murdered, there was no real sympathy at all for the Jewish people.
I couldn't quite believe it. You know, I didn't think that was the country I lived in. You know, I grew up in North London, you know, which is, generally speaking, a place where a lot of Jewish people live, and I had a lot of Jewish friends, still have, you know, and I just didn't recognise that, you know, London that I grew up in. I just thought, London has changed, you know. Is it because we've got more people here who are Muslims? Is it because we've got more people here who are radicalised in some way? You know, I just don't understand it.
I think whenever there's conflict in the Middle East, the figures and history has shown that there's an immediate increase in anti-Semitism. That's also particularly online. There were 1,450 odd incidents online that were reported, and 71% of those, when it gets broken down, were related to Israel, and that would have been triggered by the conflict, and also people wanting to collectively hold Jews responsible for the actions in Israel, and also just to have an opportunity to vent at Jews.
Right. But you see, I mean, I grew up in the 70s here, and, you know, the Six-Day War, the Golan Heights, you know, Golda Meir and all of that, you know, so there was a lot going on. The PLO, the uprising in Black September and all of that, but there was never the same kind of outpouring on the streets in London, though, there. And I put it down to the fact that because the people who are now doing that weren't living here then.
There wasn't on the streets, but I grew up around the same time as you, and I went to a comprehensive school, and I have to say I saw anti-Semitism in the coalface at that time. It was quite blatant. I remember as a young student being asked by people, why wasn't I in the gas chambers? So even then, unfortunately, anti-Semitism is in society. It's deep rooted, and it comes out. It comes out very quickly. And we've seen all these marches in central London, and the figures today show there were 223 incidents in synagogues. It's unacceptable if people are going to pray, to suffer that. And the figures are alarming in relation to higher education and also on campus. Those increases. But when you actually break down the figures in schools, it's alarming that there are less people, less Jews attacked going to school than there are with incidents that were reported in non-faith schools. And I find that particularly alarming, and the great increase, as you say, in the education sector, and also walking down the street. In public places there were 950 odd incidents, and that is frightening. I don't remember that. That is a very, very difficult thing to... It's definitely ramped up,
hasn't it?
Yes.
And I mean, this weekend, obviously, very difficult to predict what's going to happen. Donald Trump has come out and said, basically, that, you know, all hell will break loose if all the hostages aren't released. I'm beginning to wonder how many of those hostages are able to be released, because either they might be so ill that they can't be released, or they might not be still alive. It's just difficult to know, isn't it?
Well, last Saturday, look, I was mortified. I'll be frank with you. When I first saw them, I thought they looked like they had come out of a concentration camp. They were starving. We've heard horrors of being beaten. Psychological terror, held in terrible conditions, but the actual sight of them makes me absolutely fear for those hostages that are remaining, and also those hostages that are not on the list. I really worry that they're not.
And Hamas have still never ever given out any information, and I thought one of the most awful, evil things that they did, and they've done plenty of evil things, was to make that one particular man, you know, ask about his wife and his children, knowing that they'd already been killed.
Yes, absolutely. That was also awful. Part of it is a psychological campaign of terror. And what about the Bibas family? That is absolutely heartbreaking. And a few months ago, I took one of the mothers of the hostages, Avi Natan Or, up to Edinburgh to meet members of Parliament. He's the boyfriend of Noah Ogamani that was rescued. You know, he's not on the list. He's a young man. Imagine not knowing after all of this time. But I hope and I pray every day for peace, and that we aspire to a two-state solution. Obviously, the immediate unconditional
But they don't want
release.
it, do they? I mean, that's the problem. You know, I don't think the people of Palestine, or certainly the Hamas section of it, wants peace.
Well, they ought to want it, because they need to get aid in urgently. There needs to be a rebuilding of Gaza. There needs to be a viable Marshall Plan, and to aspire to a political solution. But those hostages have to be released, and they have to be released now, because it's quite clear they're not going to be able to live much longer if they look like the three that came out last week.
And I mean, for Hamas, it was a pretty bad, I know we shouldn't say it in these terms, but it was a bad piece of PR for them, which they're normally quite good at, in terms of, you know, convincing the world that, you know, they've got a just cause. But I think they lost a lot of support. I hope they did.
I hope,
as a result of that.
I think fear tactics are what they're doing. But this is going to backfire spectacularly. And you've got, of course, President Trump making it clear they'd better be released. And we all just don't know. And the uncertainty is awful. Look, nobody wants anyone to die. I don't want any children to die. I don't want any innocent Palestinians. It's a very, very difficult situation, but they have to release those hostages now.
Well, it's Wednesday today. I mean, I guess I don't think anyone's given them a particular deadline. They've just said by the weekend, haven't they? So I guess if nothing's changed by Saturday, do you see the Israeli forces going back in some way?
I think if they say they will, they probably will. As I say myself, I pray that those hostages will be released unconditionally, and that we will have a ceasefire and aspire to a permanent solution, a political solution.
That would be good for everybody. Marie, thank you very much indeed for talking to us.
Thank you for having me
Marie
today.
van der Zyl, there, past president of the Board of Deputies of British Jews. We've got much more to do coming up between now and 10 o'clock. Of course, stay with us. Next, we're going to talk some more about the assisted dying bill and whether or not it is, in fact, not going to make it through Parliament now because of the changes that are currently being made to it through the offices of Kim Ledbetter. Also, we'll be talking later on in the next hour to Tim Montgomery, former number 10 advisor, and we'll get him on what he thinks the government's doing and how badly they're doing. This is Talk.
whenever Jeremy Corbyn and these other lunatics call for a ceasefire, all they're saying is, let's stop Israel from winning the war. Unless you actually come up with a plan for saying what's going to happen after the ceasefire, you're no better off than people who want the war to continue. We know how Hamas operates. We know that they're inhuman. We saw when the hostages were released, we saw women being mobbed by thousands of very predatory males without a squeak, I'm afraid, from the left-wingers and the do-gooders.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's coming up to 8:49. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through, of course, until 10 o'clock. You know what to do. 0344 499 1000. You can send us a voice note via WhatsApp, or you can call us, of course, as well. You can text us on 87222 as well. Susan says, my dad went into a care home. They assisted him in dying. He was fed directly into his lungs by untrained staff and died by asphyxiation. No assisted dying, as it is open to abuse. And Alan says this from Peterborough: the thought of social workers making decisions on whether a person can take their own life is terrifying. Just look at how many times they get it wrong on child protection. This is a recipe for disaster. Keep up the great work. Well, I think, Alan, I would agree with that, and I think most people who have seen stories involving the social services or indeed lawyers being in charge of anything would know perhaps that that they are not the best people to be the custodians of what would be a very, very important decision, and perhaps, you know, a life-changing decision, obviously not just for the person who wished to be no longer on this earth, but the members of the family of that person as well. Let's talk to Kevin Yule, as the CEO of Humanists Against Assisted Suicide and Euthanasia. Kevin, very good morning to you.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Not at all. I'm assuming that this watered-down protection that is now supposedly being promoted in the assisted dying bill is something that that would alarm you as much as it does me.
Well, yes. I mean, I think it is watered down. It's not really Judges Plus, as it was talked about. It's really a removal of a safeguard even before the bill is passed. Right. And I think that bodes very badly for the future.
Well, because it also gives the impression, does it not, that Kim Ledbetter, who a lot of people are a bit curious about as to why she's so kind of sure about pushing this thing through, is not really keeping to her word. I mean, one of the things that was made very clear when it was first introduced, this bill, with some zeal, I would say, was that, you know, oh, don't worry, we won't be making any difficult or wrong decisions because there'll be all these safeguards in place. And if you start removing the safeguards, then you suddenly go, well, what have you got left exactly?
Well, that's absolutely true. And the safeguards will fall again. I mean, there's one amendment posted in there by Tom Gordon, which is actually going to extend from 6 months to 12 months for certain groups of the population. And the problem is when you have supply, it creates demand. And so other people will go and say, well, hold on, why shouldn't we, who are suffering longer than a year to, you know, why shouldn't we have that as well? So these safeguards will certainly fall.
Yes. And I mean, surely the fact that the reason they've gone off the idea of using a court system and using a judge in these cases is because they're worried that it would bring family courts to a standstill and people would potentially die of old age or natural causes long before a decision could be made. Kind of illustrates how difficult these cases are, and sort of illustrates, it seems to me, to maybe just leave things as they are now.
Well, yes, I think that's the very best safeguard, is to leave the law as it stands right now in place. I think that is the only thing that actually guarantees that there won't be problems. If you saw some of the witnesses coming forward, if anybody watched last week, then one of the witnesses said, oh, well, you know, if a few women with anorexia die, well, you know, eggs omelets was basically her argument. And I think that's very, very dangerous. I think we're talking about human life with this bill, and it has to be taken very, very seriously and not just thought of as a sort of casual measure that people can choose.
Yes, quite. And I was rather sort of disturbed by the cheeriness that the campaigners seemed to be filled with, you know, that they were kind of punching the air and congratulating each other. And it's a really serious thing. And that can't be a pleasant thing for anybody to go through. But it was almost as though they were sort of gloating at the fact that they'd won. And you just kind of thought, well, that's a bit inappropriate, isn't it?
Well, yes. But however, you know, I can forgive them for that. What I can't forgive them for is for introducing this bill in such a rapid way, in a way that doesn't discuss it properly. I mean, this is being rushed through, and that's the real problem with this. People have not had enough time to think about it, and this is a subject that bears thinking.
It really does.
Almost any other.
I mean, the front page of the Daily Express has got quotes from Esther Ranson on it, who's obviously backing this bill and has done all the way through. The headline says, MPs must back this crucial right to die law, says Dame Esther. And again, I don't think that's helpful, really. I'm sorry that she's in stage 4 of lung cancer treatment, and, you know, she's very, very sad and probably going to die relatively soon. But, you know, I don't think that that's very appropriate really either, is it, for her to be sort of cheerleading along for everybody else to get involved?
Well, I think that's one of the problems, is that she's a very interesting case, because, of course, when that headline first came out, I believe it was in 23, she said, I might not have, I might not get to this Christmas. And she's had not just that Christmas, but another Christmas. So in some ways, her case shows that it's not a very good idea. Yeah. It's understandable that people in that situation are very worried and depressed. But I just think that killing yourself to avoid the rest of your life is not the answer.
No, I think that's right. Kevin, good to speak to you. What do you think's going to happen next? I mean, do you think that this will put people off voting it through on the second reading, or are you less optimistic than that?
I am pretty optimistic, because I think the more that this issue is exposed in front of the public and in front of the MPs, many of whom had very little time to actually look over the bill, the more it's actually exposed and the more it's talked about, the more people go off it. And I think this is good news. So I am actually thinking that we do have a very good chance of voting it down at third reading.
Okay. Well, we'll see how that goes. I think I would be more or less in support of that position as well. Kevin, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Kevin Yule, the CEO of Humanists Against Assisted Suicide and Euthanasia. On the subject of tax dodging, Dan from Cheshire says this. Ask Jeffrey Brown why, when you report someone on the website repeatedly, they don't investigate. I've reported a landlord several times who openly abuses the laws and nothing happens. I guess you mean by that the HMRC website. Well, I don't know is the straight answer to that, but it sounds as though HMRC is not as efficient as it perhaps ought to be. Maureen says this. Good morning, Mike. Are these two WhatsApp politicians going to be sent to prison for their non-hate crime like other people? I do hope so, and double the time for them. Well, I mean, there's also a story today in the paper saying that 11 Labour councillors have also been fired and suspended from the Labour Party for taking part in those WhatsApp conversations. And on that subject, we move to another one about the police, because there was a ruling made yesterday which was actually against Sir Mark Rowley, the Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police, by another court, yet another court, basically interfering in the running of this country. Sergeant Lino Di Maria brought a judicial review against the police, claiming that stripping him of his warrant card over allegations of rape breached his rights under the European Court of Human Rights. There it is again, the ECHR. Basically, it means that hundreds of Metropolitan Police officers who failed a new vetting scheme implemented after the murder of Sarah Everard a couple of years ago could now be able to remain in their jobs after the force lost this particular case. Mrs. Justice Lang ruled that Lino Di Maria was unfairly dismissed, leading the Met to warn that the decision paved the way for about 300 officers and staff flagged for vetting in similar circumstances. So these are people who have been accused of rape, people who have been accused of sexual assault, basically touching. This guy, Di Maria, said basically that having his warrant card removed without the accusation being proved was a breach of his right to a fair trial. under Article 6 and 8 of the ECHR. He was accused of raping a woman twice in public car parks, touching a fellow police officer's leg, indecent exposure, domestic abuse, inappropriate behaviour in the workplace, and sending inappropriate messages to a member of police staff. He denied all the accusations, claiming the interactions were consensual and the rape allegations were withdrawn. He was not charged and no findings were ever made against him. You know, as a result of these allegations, he failed a new vetting process under Operation Assure, which was set up after the murder of Sarah Everard by PC Wayne Couzens. I mean, the problem here, right, is that surely the recruitment process is going wrong in the first place, because you seem to be hiring people who are later accused of all sorts of gross misconduct. Now, it may well be that he was innocent until proven guilty, but it also may well be that the investigations process was in some way tainted, because we know the Metropolitan Police have got an awful lot of people in their ranks who have committed crime. We've covered these stories before, and it is quite extraordinary that they are still allowed to be police officers. I mean, I spoke about this once before, I think during the whole Sarah Everard process, where it turns out that if you want to be a police officer, they've got a line in the recruitment signing up process which says, you know, having a criminal record may not be a deterrent to you becoming a police officer. And you go, sorry? So it's all right then. It's all right to be a criminal and a police officer. Let's get a voice note from Clifford.
Morning, Mike. Great show as always. I've been thinking all night. Now that Keir Starmer is a llama farmer, does that mean he's going to have to pay inheritance tax on his new farm when he goes? Great show.
Now, I hadn't thought of that one. Llama farmer, Starmer. I mean, I mean, the llama and the Starmer bit obviously rhyme, but llama farmer, Starmer. And if he did have a farm, yes, he probably would have to pay inheritance tax, because Rachel from accounts wouldn't let him get away with it, would she? Absolutely not. Oh, no, no, no. Democracy comes before human rights, says Celia. The majority comes before the individual. These judges and human rights lawyers are throwing democracy into a ditch. I couldn't agree more. Coming up, Tim Montgomery's going to join us, former number 10 advisor, founder of Conservative Home. He's got plenty to say about this government. We'll get right to it after the news, coming up next.
I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
I have just returned from Buckingham Palace to form the next government of this great nation.
Take a look at what happened.
I immediately knew it was very serious, that we were under attack.
The time has come, and this surely is England's time. Williams, who scores, and Spain lead. A shot from distance is in. It is Cole Palmer. Low ball in on Farmer, slides it in.
An absolute killer of a goal.
I agree with the protest, but I don't think the violence was anywhere near necessary.
No, I mean, I don't think anyone, Nigel, would ever think that the violence was the answer at all.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in, they're eating the cats.
Liberal left couldn't understand that this man could be anything other than the great newsreader, a man of integrity.
Is it possible in any way, shape or form that Keir Starmer didn't know about these facts about the suspect in Southport?
I find it extraordinary that he wouldn't know. It seems that the public has not been told the truth.
No, there's nothing like an American election, I have to say. North Dakota has gone red, South Dakota's red, Texas is red.
Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason.
Bloomberg UK reporting Ukraine has made the first long-range missile strike inside of Russia. These are the missiles that Biden...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 2 minutes past 9. I'm Mike Graham. The sun is indeed up. If you are not up yet, I mean, I'll forgive you, but you really should be, because the kids should be at school, you should be at work. I mean, obviously, if you're going to run the border force, you might not worry about it, because you're in Finland. And you're working from home. This is a guy on the front page of the Daily Mail today. His name is John Tuckett. He's 73 years old, which seems a bit old to be recruited for a new job, doesn't it? Pays about 130,000 quid. He wants to be new independent chief inspector of borders and immigration. He's the favoured candidate by this useless government, right? And one of the things that he wants to do is work from home where he lives in Finland. That's right, he doesn't live in Britain, but he wants to be in charge of our borders. And one of the reasons why he presumably wants to be in charge of our borders is because they are, ladies and gentlemen, rather porous. One of the problems is that in addition to all of the people that come here illegally already, we're now being told by a court, specifically by Hugo Norton-Taylor, a judge in an immigration tribunal, that basically Palestinian migrants should be given the right to live in the UK after applying through a scheme which was originally meant for Ukrainian refugees. This is one particular story where a family of 6 who were seeking to flee Gaza have been allowed to join their brother in Britain after an immigration judge ruled that the Home Office's rejection of their application breached their, you guessed it, human rights. Absolutely unbelievable. This is incredible stuff, right? It basically means that the floodgates will now be open for anybody to come here from any war zone, from any place of conflict, they say, as long as they can identify a member of their family who is already living here. And we already know that that's what people have done. Come here on small boats illegally, got off the dinghy, wandered into a coach, ended up in a hotel somewhere in Northampton and decided that they want to bring the rest of the family with them. Absolutely incredible stuff, isn't it? 0344 499 1000 is the number. If you've forgotten how to get through on a voice note, have a listen to this.
Morning, Mike. Fantastic show as always.
Morning, Mike. It's Kelly from Essex.
We must never leave the ECHR. It is international law and must be obeyed at all times. As a side note, I'm Plank.
Morning, Mike. Laura in Wiltshire.
Morning, Mike. Phil from Nottingham. Great show.
Morning, mate. John in Glasgow.
Morning, Mike. Well, I'd like to apologise first of all. I slept in, missed 8 minutes of your show, but it's my day off anyway.
Please make it make sense.
Labour are now the grown-ups in the room.
I'm a llama. I'm a llama.
Now that Keir Starmer is a llama farmer, does that mean he's going to have to pay inheritance tax on his new farm when he goes? Great show.
Dear, oh dear, oh dear. What is going on in the world of politics in this country? Meanwhile, Rachel Reeves is being told by a series of economists that she's probably lost any fiscal headroom that she once had, and come March and certainly into April, it looks like she's going to have to put up more taxes. And this time, it'll be income tax, which of course they said they wouldn't do. But, I mean, they've broken every other bleeding promise, haven't they? So why should we be at all surprised? Also, we'll be telling you this morning about how children have got so fat in this country that some of them are having to have hip operations in order to help them to be able to walk properly. Meanwhile, we've got a Chagos judge, one of the people that advised Britain to sell the Chagos Islands in the International Court for Justice. It turns out is actually a Chinese national, a member of the Chinese Communist Party and a former member of the Chinese official government. Absolutely incredible. 0344 499 1000 is the number. This is Morning Glory. Let us get it on. I don't know where to begin in this particular hour. It's the final hour of the show. We've got lots and lots to talk about, including the police situation, including, of course, what is going on inside the head of Keir Starmer. This week he could have gone to an AI summit in Paris, but he chose not to. He decided that wasn't for him. It's the first foreign trip I think he's turned down. He's waiting to go over to the Americans to go and see President Trump, who yesterday had a rather interesting kind of encounter with Elon Musk inside the White House, inside the Oval Office. We might bring you a bit of that coming up in a little while. But let's go back to what happened in Westminster yesterday, because we're going to kick off with Lee Anderson, because after the last 2 days where we spent nothing but talking about chicken nuggets and llamas, here's what he had to say. He put a question to the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting.
Lee Anderson. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now, the new Health Minister has stated that it's OK for a human being to present as a llama. So what I want to know is, if I have a family member who presents as a llama, suddenly becomes ill in the middle of the night, do they send for a doctor, a vet, or a straitjacket?
Mr. Speaker, I can just say to the honourable member that my honourable friend, the Minister for Public Health, believes in treating every human being with the dignity and respect they deserve, even the honourable gentleman.
Even the honourable gentleman. Wes Streeting there, as I said before, playing a rather straight bat to that particular situation that was raised by Lee Anderson. Very funny. He's a stand-up comedian waiting in the wings there. Also on that story, according to the Daily Mail, 11 Labour councillors have now been suspended for their part in those WhatsApp messages. First of all, it was Andrew Gwynn, the Health Minister. Then it became Oliver Ryan, who was the young MP who seemed to be taking part in it as well before he was an actual MP. But Labour has now suspended 11 councillors over that WhatsApp group and the messages which were seen to be homophobic, which were seen to be racist, which were seen to be anti-Semitic. I mean, if this is how Labour operates, there really isn't much hope for them, is there? Absolutely dreadful. Meanwhile, though, you might remember a woman by the name of Sue Gray, because she was in the news yesterday, getting in sort of indoctrinated or introduced, if you like, to the House of Lords. Let's have a look at that.
I, Susan, Baroness Gray of Tottenham, do swear by Almighty God that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to His Majesty King Charles, his heirs and successors, according to law, so help me God.
Very nice too. A very nice little earner as well if you can get yourself nominated into the House of Lords. Let's not forget that Keir Starmer in the past has talked about not only reforming the House of Lords but doing away with it altogether. But in fact, she was one of 30 new Labour peers named by the Prime Minister in December. She, of course, came into government, if you might remember, after being the chief cabinet officer inside Downing Street. She was the one who basically accused the Partygate people of committing all sorts of ghastly, terrible things, and she was the one who kind of basically fingered Boris Johnson as the man responsible for it all, which eventually led to him having to resign as Prime Minister. She then went straight away to work for Keir Starmer as his Chief of Staff, and has since been doing nothing but having rows with everybody inside the Labour Party. So they eventually had to get rid of her and give her a job in the House of Lords. So House of Lords now over 800 members, by the way. Only China's People's Congress is bigger in size, which is quite extraordinary, isn't it? More than 800 people in the House of Lords. I mean, what is the point of that? 0344 499 1000 is the number. Morning, Mike, says Keith in Durham. This government deported 47 Albanian migrants in a private plane at a cost to us of £1 million, or just over £21,000 per migrant. Yeah, I know. Absolutely ridiculous. Surely we must have more than 47 Albanian migrants in the UK who could have filled the plane. Well, yeah, you would have thought so. And, of course, one of the things that we know about this government is that they keep deporting people who want to go home anyway. So they're claiming that they've deported 19,000 people, but it turns out, actually, only about 5,000 of those were deported, shall we say, against their will. And, of course, the Home Office would probably say it's basically cheaper to send them back at that cost, £21,000 per migrant, than keeping them here, because that would cost even more money. Absolutely unbelievable. Meanwhile, over in America, we've got two things to show you. One is Peter Mandelson, who was finally sworn in as the new ambassador to the United States of America. And doesn't he look smug? Have a look at this.
Hello, I'm Peter Mandelson, and I'm proud to serve as His Majesty's British Ambassador to the United States of America. It's great to be up and running in the US, a country in which I have spent so much of my adult life and admire so much.
Isn't it lovely? Is it so nice to be the ambassador? Well, of course it's nice. It's a great job. You know, you get to live in this great grace and favour mansion. You get to hang out with the sort of the great and the good of Washington, D.C. You get to rub shoulders with world leaders. You probably get invited to the White House for the odd, you know, champagne reception. Plenty of dinners that you can go to. You know, and he's delighted to be the representative of Great Britain. Well, I'm sure you'll have a very nice time, my Lord Mandelson. Let's not forget, he's the guy that had to resign from government twice when he was caught out in various rows of one kind or another, almost all of which were a bit sleazy, shall we say. The other thing that happened in America yesterday was, of course, the Elon Musk visitation to the White House and to the Oval Office. And it's quite a weird scene, but if you watch it, it's quite interesting. You've got Elon Musk basically talking about unelected bureaucrats while he is, of course, an unelected bureaucrat, standing over the President of the United States, Donald Trump. Check it out.
We have this unelected, fourth unconstitutional branch of government, which is the bureaucracy, which has, in a lot of ways, currently more power than any elected representative. And this is not something that people want, and it's not. It does not match the will of the people, so it's just something we've got to fix.
I mean, I like Elon Musk. I'm a big fan. I like Donald Trump, but it's a bit of a weird scene, that, isn't it? Because here's a guy talking about unelected bureaucrats and how dangerous it can be, while his son is sort of at his feet. I think that's X, his son. Donald Trump sitting there quite quietly, unusually, and here is a guy talking about unelected bureaucrats who is himself an unelected bureaucrat. I mean, he's doing a great job of finding all sorts of savings inside of the US government. But it is a little bit ironic, isn't it? And finally, you know, in our introduction to this hour, the other story that really piqued my interest was one about the Chagos Islands case, because one of the judges in the International Court of Justice, which is the place where this all started, where the British were told by the International Court of justices that they should start the process to get rid of the Chagos Islands, to give them back to Mauritius, even though Mauritius never wanted them, even though Mauritius never really played any part in their history, and even though it's actually dangerous for our national security. One of the judges, believe it or not, is a Chinese woman who's a member of the Chinese Communist Party and who has previously been an official in the Chinese government. Her name is Zhu Hangqin, right? And apparently she is somehow a member of this International Court of Justice, despite the fact that China will benefit massively if Chagos Islands are sold. Not least will they benefit from the point of view of militarily, but they'll also benefit probably commercially as well. Seems completely and utterly bonkers, doesn't it? Absolutely crazy. China has always supported Mauritius' claim to the islands, and critics of Sir Keir Starmer's deal say that Beijing hopes to secure a foothold in the Indian Ocean, weakening the strategically important base in Diego Garcia. So you've basically got somebody who is a signed-up member of the Chinese government in a position to influence Britain to say they must sell the Chagos Islands. You're kind of going, what? How does this happen? The deal looks even more bonkers than it did before. Crazy. Let's get a voice note from Ben.
Morning, Mike. Ben from Frimley here. Just using the massage gun on my shoulder to think about, you know, forgetting about Keir Starmer. But when I move the massage gun round to my neck, I turn into Keir Starmer, blame the far right, arrest the tweeters, avoid Donald Trump, blame Elon Musk, freeze the pensioners, release the sausages, release the sausages.
Deary me. I'm not quite sure where the massage bit came in there, but very good, Ben. Well done. Well played, indeed. Carl says this morning, Mike, referencing the Palestinian ruling, the Ukraine settlement was a temporary deal until the end of the fighting. Israel-Palestine now has a ceasefire, so it's not applicable. If Israel resume fighting, they'll close the Palestinian border again, so nobody would get here if they wanted to. So it has no real-world use as a case. Well, you say that, but I'm not actually sure, Carl, because the point is that because the case has created a precedent and one particular family has now found their way to Britain because one of them has got a relative here, then it means that other people can do the same thing. And you might say, well, Palestinians won't be able to get out of Palestine if the war starts again. But there are other parts of the world where the people are at war, which means that other parts of the world can find people here who are relatives of theirs, and they can suddenly move in. South Sudan, for example, you know, Somalia, you know, Congo, any number of places in Africa, any number of places like Libya where there's still a conflict going on. You know, people might start wanting to come here from, I don't know, Morocco and say there's a conflict going on. The point is it's even weaker, and he's giving even more reason why we have to be tougher on immigration. That's the point. Coming up, we're going to talk about the latest situation regarding the troubles in Northern Ireland, the payouts that are going to come, which might actually benefit the likes of Gerry Adams. He could become a multi-millionaire as a result of compensation paid to him by you and I. Wouldn't that be great? It's 9:17.
Today I will sign a series of historic executive orders. We will pursue our manifest destiny into the stars, launching American astronauts to plant the stars and stripes on the planet Mars. I will also sign an executive order to immediately stop all government censorship and bring back free speech to America. As of today, it will henceforth be the official policy of the United States government that there are only two genders, male and female.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's 9:20. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock. Julie Hartley-Brewer will join us then and tell us what's coming up on her show. Lots going on today, of course. We've been talking a lot about Lord Hermer, the Attorney General, because it turns out that he's also now facing even more pressure to step down from his job because it's been revealed that he had a friendship with another solicitor by the name of Shiner, Phil Shiner, a discredited man, a fraud as it turns out. He was one of those who claimed that British soldiers were involved in torture and killings and war crimes in Iraq during the war there, and of course he was immediately dismissed. He was known as the scourge of the British Army. Lord Hermer, of course, who famously has faced questions about his representation of Gerry Adams, the former leader of Sinn Féin, is now being questioned as to why he was so quick to defend this guy, Phil Shiner, who was an absolute and utter discredited lawyer and a man who was called, as we say, a completely convicted fraudster. He now has been also, Hermer, linked with this other story which has been going on and troubling me, going back to the troubles in Northern Ireland, in which Gerry Adams could claim damages in the amount of probably tens of millions of pounds, but the whole cost of the entire ridiculous shebang could be as high as 2.7 billion. And of course, Lord Hermer did represent Gerry Adams in a previous compensation case as well. But let's talk now to Sammy Wilson, Democratic Unionist Party MP for East Antrim. Sammy, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
Good to talk to you. I mean, people will be rightly pretty worked up about this story, and they will be particularly worked up when they find out, if it happens, that Gerry Adams has been compensated for his troubles, shall we say, during the Troubles.
Well, Mike, let's just get the story, the details of this story. Gerry Adams, along with others, were detained in the early part of the Troubles because of their alleged associations with terrorism. The order was signed by the wrong person. There was never any question about should they have been detained or should they not have been detained. Instead of being signed by the Secretary of State, the order was signed by the Under Secretary of State. So this was about the wrong person putting a signature on a piece of paper to detain Gerry Adams and others. Right. And then when it was taken to court, it was found that his human rights were abused because the wrong person had signed his papers, and therefore the government was guilty of misconduct. Now, this isn't just about Gerry Adams. There are about 400 others who will be able to hang on to this judgment. And this is a judgment which was not necessary. There was actually legislation which was gone through Parliament, which would have stopped this kind of compensation being paid. But the government repealed that legislation. It didn't need to repeal the legislation. It could have kept the legislation on the statute books. And as a result, as you say, we could be paying out tens, hundreds of millions of pounds to people who were detained because of their alleged involvement in terrorism. Yeah. And this is typical of this government that seems to be prepared to pander to the worst elements of society because their human rights are abused, and yet at the same time take money off pensioners, take money off other worthy causes because they say there's a black hole in the finances.
Well, this is it. I mean, you know, because we're run by a human rights lawyer, and the Attorney General is another human rights lawyer, and so many of the people in government now are sympathetic to the human rights of anyone who wants to have a go at Britain. They don't seem to care about the human rights of the British people, actually. And in fact, in the same way, and I know that this isn't just a Labour problem, you know, you've got former, you know, army veterans, people who gave their all for their own country, still being investigated, still going through a charging process, still going through potentially trials over things that happened, you know, 50 years ago.
And not being defended very well by the government either.
No.
There was an urgent question in the House of Commons yesterday about a decision by a coroner where looking into the deaths of 4 IRA terrorists, IRA terrorists who had just shot up a police station, had jumped on a lorry, were escaping, had a machine gun mounted on the lorry, and because the SAS opened fire on them and killed them, the coroner said that they should have, the soldiers should have taken other action to try and arrest them first. Now you imagine, I mean, here are people who are armed to the teeth, had a machine gun mounted on a lorry that could have fired 600 rounds, and they're not cutting down all of the soldiers. And 30 years later, a coroner decides, a judge decides that the soldiers acted inappropriately. Right. Now, those, you can be absolutely sure, the families of those 4 dead terrorists will be rushing to the court tomorrow to get compensation. Right. Incidentally, the getaway driver in that incident was shot by the army. Now, don't forget, he was involved in taking terrorists away, and he's already got £74,000 in compensation. Now, this is where all of this public money is going to. And again, we found yesterday in the House of Commons, the Secretary of State was more about trying to be cautious and avoid and not cause offence and everything else, rather than standing up for the soldiers and say, look, it was the right decision for the soldiers to shoot armed terrorists, and we stand with them, and we will appeal this decision. We will judicially review this decision because it was just madness.
Yeah. No, I saw that response from Hilary Benn. I think it was to your question about the whole situation in involving all of this, and he was very sure that, you know, we must uphold the rule of law, we must uphold the human rights of all people. I mean, it beggars belief. It's almost as if they've forgotten what was going on back then. And I think, you know, I'm right in saying that did the coroner not, in that case you're talking about, also say that it was unlawful killing?
Yes, he did. And I mean, this is a coroner who, by the way, during the Troubles would have had a police escort with him all the time.
Right.
And I guarantee if he had been faced with armed terrorists trying to kill him, he would have expected those police officers to shoot the terrorists and protect his life. And yet we find now that he is saying that this was unlawful because the soldiers should have tried to arrest the terrorists, even though they were armed to the teeth, even though they had shown that they were out of intent on murder because they'd shot up the police station. And, you know, it's easy 30 years afterwards. We placed soldiers in harm's way in Northern Ireland to defend people against terrorism. And now, years later, we're condemning them for the actions that they took on the spot, faced with danger to their own lives and danger to other people's lives. And instead of saluting them, we're abandoning them.
Yeah.
And furthermore, then, as a result of that, the very people who were involved in the terrorism can claim money.
Yeah.
And, it's not just, I mean, the money's one thing, and that, I mean, it appalls people at a time when the country is in difficulties financially. But the more important thing from my point of view as a unionist is that these cases are being used to rewrite the history of the Troubles, where the army and the police are seen as the bad people.
Right.
They're seen as the people who caused the trouble, who broke the law, and the terrorists are being whitewashed. That, to me, is the real offence here.
Yeah.
The brave people who stood against terrorism and stood to protect society are now being treated as villains.
I know.
And as you say,
Shocking.
dragged out of their homes by police officers at 7 o'clock in the morning, hauled over. Don't forget, one of the soldiers who had been cleared twice was pulled up to a court again in Belfast, hauled out of his home in England at 74 years of age. The stress of the court case, he died during the court case.
Right.
That's the kind of way we're treating people who had worked for the good of the country. And I mean, governments should be, in Westminster here, should be ashamed that they're not standing up for those people.
Exactly right. Couldn't agree more. And this Policy Exchange report, which is revealing how much money this could cost, they're saying 1.4 billion's already been spent, 1.3 billion still to come. I mean, is this more or less inevitable then, you think, that Gerry Adams is going to get money?
No, it's not inevitable. And I mean, if the government were simply to reinstate the legislation which went through before the election, then that would stop Gerry Adams getting the money. But again, it's, we can't go against people's human rights. You know, say if human rights legislation is being abused in this way, then let's withdraw ourselves from it. I mean, it's being abused for immigrants.
Yeah.
It's being abused for foreign criminals. It's been abused for terrorists. And if it is so abused in that way, then withdraw from it, because all it does is it protects the worst elements of society and annoys the best of society.
Yeah, absolutely right. Well, listen, Sammy, all we can do is keep pressuring them to try and see sense, but they don't seem to take any notice of any pressure, do they? They just keep blindly carrying on, walking towards the edge of the cliff without seemingly realising it's there.
Well, I hope that public pressure forces the government to do what they have to do to stop this abuse and ensure that we don't finish up with 400 people being given massive amount of compensation. And when you're talking about hundreds of thousands per individual, simply because the wrong person signed a bit of paper to detain them.
I know. Incredible. It's madness, isn't it? Absolutely crazy. Sammy, great to talk to you. Thanks very much again for joining us. Sammy Wilson, Democratic Unionist Party MP for East Antrim, talking common sense, man. Isn't it common sense? The idea, the story that he's talking about the 4 members of the SAS who have been ruled by a coroner to have unlawfully killed some terrorists. I mean, the story itself is so shocking that these guys have to act quickly on the turn of a trigger. They have to basically be prepared to do whatever it needs, whatever it takes to stay alive and to take out the bad guys. And as Sam says there, Sammy, they're now being treated as the bad guys. Let's talk to Kirsten in London, who's got something to say about it. Hi, Kirsten.
Hi, good morning, Mike.
Morning. What can I do for you?
I've spoken to you and your colleagues before. I come from Honduras, but it seems like in the first world country, not only in the UK,
right.
You guys have lost all common sense. I mean, when do these criminals started having human rights?
Yeah, I know. And they think everybody has them. They think it's fine.
Yeah, I mean, they break the law, they kill people, that's it. They don't have any rights.
Right, exactly. And my
you need to go
exactly.
back to, I mean, we, because I'm now a very, very happy and proud British citizen,
Yeah.
but we need to go back to basics.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, my view of that, all of the human rights action that we deal with now, is that if you commit a crime, then you don't have human rights anymore, you know?
Exactly. They should be put like they used to in the olden age, have them and do forced labour.
Yeah.
Get bread and water, and that's it.
Exactly right. Exactly right. I mean, we shouldn't be giving them money for being compensated for having committed crime, which is what we're talking about.
Yeah, it's absolutely ridiculous.
It's mad,
I
isn't
do
it?
hope that we go back to basics in that sense anyway. But,
Yeah, I think you're right. Kirsten, thanks for the call. This from Russ, who says, Mike, having been a police officer for 17 years, I've now left. I know that vetting has been reduced or removed to allow underrepresented minorities to apply and be accepted. A number of them are now undergoing investigation for various allegations and criminal connections. It's like a series of line of duty. And then it says, happy to talk more about policing if necessary. Well, Russ, it's always interesting to talk about policing. We've got another police-related story to tell you in a little while. Charles in Bearsden in Glasgow says, morning, Mike. Excellent show. Regarding tax avoidance issues and HMRC, do the civil servants working from home but on beaches and towns abroad qualify for tax allowance for working abroad? Well, that's a very good question. I don't know is the answer to that. But what we do know is that the guy who wants to run the border force should not be working from home, particularly since his home happens to be in Finland. Do you know what I'm saying? 0344 499 1000. Paul says, Mike, so we are now compelled to take in asylum seekers from Gaza. Just how many will be Hamas or Hamas supporters? Well, it's a good question. We don't know. And Paul says, we are in the ditch. It is bonkers, isn't it? Absolutely ridiculous. Coming up, we're going to talk about J.D. Vance, who's, of course, the Vice President to Donald Trump in the White House. He's been over in Paris recently at an AI conference. This is the first thing that old Keir Starmer's turned down. He was actually invited to go to the AI conference in Paris, but declined, presumably because he thought it was going to be attended by no president of America, just the vice president. It was probably too good for him, he didn't need to go. But I don't know if he sent Angela Rayner for the AI, or would he have sent his business secretary, or would he have sent his technology secretary? I don't know. We'll find out. We'll talk to a leading AI consultant about what exactly is going on over there.
UK. On DAB+. On your smart speaker. On your smart TV. And on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 9:37. I'm Mike Graham with you right up to 10 o'clock. Julie Hartley-Brewer will be here shortly before that, just to tell us what's coming up. Regarding the 4 IRA people being killed, says Stuart, what about all the policemen they just shot? Are they getting compensation? Well, that's the problem, isn't it? No, of course they're not. They might have got some compensation, or their families might have got some compensation at the time, but it wouldn't have been very much. And Jeff in Bedford says, Mike, I had my uncle murdered, Mountbatten family. I wouldn't have ever attended a party with anyone who had anything to do with the IRA. The country is being run by idiots. Absolutely. And Dave in South Gloucestershire says, it appears the law always comes down on the side of the human rights of terrorist murderers. No mention is made of the human rights of the civilians and others who these terrorists killed and maimed. It really doesn't. It's awful, really, isn't it? I mean, it's just another example of how the Human Rights Brigade have kind of taken everything over, basically. It does seem to be completely mad and insane. We're going to talk to Rohit Talwar, a now leading AI consultant, because over in Paris this week, the great and the good, some of them anyway, have been descending to find out what is going on. And let's have a look at J.D. Vance, who's the Vice President, of course, to Donald Trump. Here's what he had to say.
This administration wants to be very clear about one last point. We will always center American workers in our AI policy. We refuse to view AI as a purely disruptive technology that will inevitably automate away our labor force. We believe, and we will fight for policies that ensure that AI is going to make our workers more productive, and we expect that they will reap the rewards with higher wages, better benefits, and safer and more prosperous communities.
J.D. Vance there speaking in Paris at a conference that Keir Starmer was invited to but didn't go. Let's find out from Rohit Talwar what it's all about. Rohit, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for joining us. Whenever AI is discussed, I'm always pretty sure that not everybody knows what it is they're really talking about. You know, I mean, some people will say, you know, the advent of AI is going to be great for everybody. You'll have more leisure time. You won't be wasting your precious hours and every single day doing things that you don't need to do. You know, machines will do it for you. What's been sort of coming out of this particular conference as far as you know, the way forward is concerned?
Well, firstly, just a bit of context. We're very early in the AI journey, so what most people think of when we talk about AI, the generative AI tools like ChatGPT or Gemini or Perplexity or DeepSeek that's just come out of China, or Qwen 2.5 that's just followed it. Right. But those are very early in the development of AI. They are almost like the kind of first cars where people walked in front of them waving a flag. Where we're moving towards is what's called artificial general intelligence, which will be as smart or smarter than humans. The big tech companies know this because they're pouring literally hundreds of billions of dollars of development into this. They also know that it is going to be, when that comes, it is going to be a dramatic shock for society. Last year, Sunak hosted the Bletchley AI Summit, the first big global government leaders summit, and there they were really focused on the risks that AI posed, both to jobs but also in terms of security, and AI basically being able to control weapon systems, launch all sorts of unfriendly attacks on people through technology. So it is a massive risk. It's also a massive commercial opportunity. The Paris AI Summit kind of ducked the issue because it was trying to appeal to everyone.
No.
It was pretty watered down. It had all the terms like diversity and inclusion and security and transparency, and it had all the catch-all phrases. But Vance and the US were never going to agree to that because they don't want to agree to anything that holds back the US tech corporations. In fact, they're pushing the UK to relax regulations in return for not applying sanctions. So they want the big players like Microsoft and Google, Facebook and OpenAI to have unlimited ability to do whatever they want.
Right.
And you've got to understand that, like, the size of the prize here. So Microsoft alone, who are one of the biggest players here, they alone are worth more than the FT 100 companies, so the top 100 companies on the UK Stock Exchange. Add to that Google, or Alphabet, Amazon, Facebook, Nvidia, who make the chips, and your top 6, they are worth between 18 to 20% of the entire global stock market. So this is massive, and it is the source of the competition now between the US and China for AI dominance. And so you can understand why the US didn't want to play ball. They don't want any control. Europe wants to try and control things just so that Europe doesn't fall completely behind the 8 ball. And the UK, my sense is there was a bit of a kind of mealy-mouthed statement about it wasn't clear enough about global governance. Yeah, it was more that we're falling in line with the US. We'll march to Elon Musk / Donald Trump's tune. And it's really Musk who's setting the agenda here on tech.
Yeah, and he's very hot, isn't he, on not having any regulation really at all. And that's the document, I think, that was signed by 60 different countries, including China, but not signed by the UK, as you say, and the US. I mean, I guess, again, it's a bit like the internet, isn't it? I mean, you can't really have it governed differently in different parts of the world, surely, because, you know, the internet is there for all to access. If you start trying to close bits of it off, that's difficult to do and almost impossible to do, really. And would it not be the same for AI?
Well, a couple of things. One is the internet can be controlled. China's done a very successful job of limiting people's access to it there. They see what it wants them to see. So you can do it.
Yeah, but you can get around that, though. I mean, I know people who've gone to China with VPNs and done what they would normally do.
Yeah, but you'll get arrested if they find you doing it.
Well, yeah, but I mean,
so,
but they didn't.
You know, there is that, you know. But with AI, it's going to be hard to control as it gets more and more powerful, because it will be everywhere. And there are literally tens of millions of people developing AI around the world. By far the largest number are in China, which is also a concern for some countries in the world.
I mean, if, for example, you wanted to use ChatGPT in France and the rules in France were different to the rules in Britain, would that mean that you wouldn't get the same response if you asked it a question?
Yeah, so the most likely thing is that they would try and block people's access to it. As you say, you can try VPNs, but there are so many of these tools now, and the French want to promote their own tools, so it's not like they're against it. What they're against is the potential for bias within these systems. So you get certain information promoted over others. The potential for lots of people not to have access to these systems. So if they're all in English, there's a chunk of the world that don't have English as a first language. So there's a variety of kind of legitimate reasons why you'd want this to have some level of protection, but also the militarization of the tech, that when you start to have AI that can basically make its own targeting decisions, can decide when to fire, and there's no human oversight, that becomes a bit scary. And that's the thing, that once you start developing this stuff, the developers are so excited by what they're building and creating something that's getting close to human levels of intelligence, that they're not necessarily being held back by those concerns. They just want the freedom to run.
Sure, and that's, again, similar to the story about the internet, isn't it? And why the internet now is being questioned, certainly by, you know, the online harms bill and all that kind of stuff, as to what people should be able to see and what should be banned from being on it.
Well, yeah, and we've seen so many cases, obviously hard cases make bad law, but we've seen double standards as well. The internet companies could do a lot more. So if you go into one of the famous search engines and say, how do I harm my dog? It will direct you to all sorts of sites that tell you not to harm your dog and why you shouldn't do it. If you say, how do I make a deep fake porn video of my partner? It will take you to sites where you can pay to have a deep fake made in about 30 minutes. So there's double standards at play there, and they could do a lot more to protect people and to protect the misuse of information. It's going to get harder and harder as these AI systems become more powerful, and as nations' economies become more and more dependent on this. There was almost no conversation as well in Paris about where we're heading with this in economic terms. it will replace jobs. There's absolutely no doubt. People are not investing the kind of money they're investing in this in order to just deliver better customer service.
No.
Or a faster answer to customer questions. People are predicating their investment as end user businesses. They're predicating it on saving 50, 60% of labour costs.
Right.
And we need to have woken up about 10 years ago to this. But now, really, the government ought to be putting a massive emphasis on getting people to reskill and start learning how to use these tools so they can make them useful in their own lives. This is the first technology that can teach you how to use it. Like if you get in your car and say, teach me how to drive, it's going to be a very dull conversation because the car's not going to say anything. But you go to ChatGPT or one of these other tools and say, I'm a complete novice. I've never used any of these tools before. I'm willing to spend 15 minutes a day for the next 14 days. Please create a course for me showing me what I need to learn each day and what I need to ask you each day in order to become proficient. And in a minute, it has knocked out a training course for you. That's the kind of place we're moving to. And so people really need to understand what's going on, how powerful these technologies are, how fast they're moving, and how important it is to make ourselves aware of what the tech can do and start thinking about what our next job and our job after that might be and learning the skills to do those jobs.
Yeah. Interesting stuff. Interesting times indeed. Rohit, thank you very much indeed. Rohit Talwar, leading AI consultant there, because, yeah, it sounds like another recipe for disaster, doesn't it? People sitting at home basically saying that, you know, I'm going to learn how to use AI, so I'm going to sit here for 15 minutes a day doing a course. Blimey, absolutely unbelievable. I wonder if it can teach you how to win £25,000, though. Check this out. It's competition time, and we're giving you a chance to win a whopping £25,000. So what do you need to do to get involved? All you have to do is text the word prize to 83338, or you can enter by post. It's as simple as that. Once again, to get involved, just text the word prize to 83338, or you can enter by post.
18 plus, UK excluding NI. Enter by SMS for £2 plus one standard network charge by 11 p.m. on March the 3rd, 2025. Or send your name, email and contact number to £25,000 cash competition, PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP, to arrive by 5 p.m. on March the 6th, 2025. This is a News Broadcasting Network promotion. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com.
And there you go. Good luck with that. Stuart says this. It says it all when the funny Lee Anderson cracks a joke in Parliament that any normal Brit would find funny, only to see the government front bench of anti-British humourless woke lefties that hardly anybody wants running our country sat there sulking with their miserable and clueless faces. That's another great slogan for this government, isn't it? Miserable and clueless. That's certainly what they would appear to be. It's 10 minutes to 10. This is Morning Glory.
government borrowing costs hit a 27-year high, and the pound is taking a pounding. Gloomy economic data is expected to show inflation and growth are off course.
Let me ask again, and can you please be clear, will Rachel Reeves be your Chancellor for the duration of this parliament?
Rachel Reeves is doing a fantastic job. She has my full confidence. She has the full confidence of the entire party.
Can Rachel Reeves hold on as Chancellor?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through for about another 6 minutes or so. Julie Hartley-Brewer will be here very shortly to tell us what's coming up on her show. Let's get a couple of voice notes out of the way, though. Here's one from Chris on ignoring the ECHR.
Hi, Mike. Chris from Epsom. Great show. Listen, we chose to ignore the ECHR when they demanded that we give prisoners the right to vote. So we can ignore them when we want to. It's just the will is not there. Have a great day.
That's a very good point, actually. Yeah, I remember when there were some people in Parliament who wanted to give prisoners a vote, and then it was outlawed, and so it didn't happen. Let's have a word with Alex in Cheltenham, shall we? He wants to talk about Trump. Alex, very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike.
Good for you for calling in. What do you want to say?
I was going to say Musk isn't really an unelected bureaucrat. He's part of an elected administration. It's how it works in America.
No, but he was appointed, though. He wasn't elected.
Yeah, but he's talking about... Yeah, but he's part of... Everybody in the administration's appointed apart from the president.
Yeah, no, I know that. But the point is, I just found it slightly ironic that he was going on about unelected bureaucrats when he actually is one. I mean, I'm a big fan of his.
He's talking more about the permanent federal bureaucrats, to be honest.
I'm sure he is. He's talking about their equivalent of the civil service in the same way that we would talk about our civil service like that. The point I was making was simply that he is, curiously, unelected himself.
Yeah, but... He's part of an elected administration.
Yeah, but you know I'm right, really, don't you?
No, I've
you
got to agree to disagree, Mike.
Well, was he elected or not?
Well,
yes or no?
Really, he was.
No, he wasn't.
He was
which ballot was he on?
Well,
he wasn't elected.
Part of the elected administration, Mike. But have a good day anyway.
Yeah, okay. Thanks very much. It's easy to disagree with me if you want, but you're wrong. That's the problem. Let's talk to Darren, who's got something on compensation.
Morning, Mike. Darren from Suffolk. Great show. So let me get this right. Somebody tomorrow tries to assassinate Keir Starmer with a gun, and his bodyguards cannot shoot that man. They've got to try and intercept him. So basically, if they do shoot him, the family of the assassin can actually claim compensation. Brilliant.
I know, it's absolutely incredible, isn't it? Totally and utterly ridiculous, which again puts more pressure, it seems to me. We heard from the Unionist MP, did we not, Sammy Wilson, who said, look, this is not inevitable. So your public can put pressure on Keir Starmer not to actually admit that this is going to happen, right? So that's the thing. What we are saying is that basically there should be no compensation for Jerry Adams in this case, and there should be no compensation for the hundreds of other people who are actually seeking it. Stuart says, Mike, I assume British citizens and soldiers will get compensation for death, disability, torture and more at the hands of the IRA, all of which was illegal. Well, of course, absolutely right. And even more ridiculously, we've learned today from the Times that the Attorney-General, Lord Harmer, as I like to call him, Richard Hermer, KC, was matey with a guy who is now viewed basically as the scourge of the British Army, a man who brought loads and loads of legal cases against British military individuals, British personnel, accused them of torture, accused them of killings, accused them of war crimes basically in Iraq. It turned out they were all false accusations. He has now been thought to be a convicted fraudster. He's a man by the name of Phil Shiner. And basically Richard Hermer gave him sort of a green light, if you like, for an infamous press conference at which he and another solicitor aired claims which were found to be false about British troops. And he also backed him and issued a robust defence of him. I mean, how much more does this guy Herman need to do before he loses his job as Attorney General? Seems extraordinary. Julie Hartley-Brewer is here. Very good morning.
Very good morning. I wonder if he gets some free clothes from Lord Ali as well. I mean, they're all mates. They're all mates together. They can do no wrong.
Isn't it ridiculous?
They're weird. And what I love is they all think they're the nice people.
Oh, I know. They're
the
so
good people.
nice.
They're so nice. They're the good people. We're the bad people. They're the good people. Oh.
Keir Starmer, he's obviously learned his lesson. He doesn't put out so many sort of visual tweets anymore. He's just put one out saying, we didn't have much when we were growing up. I'm just tweeting him going, what did your dad do? Because I just don't know. Do you know what his dad did?
He never mentions it.
No.
Also, he's never very accurate about when he does mention it, does he?
Well, he just tells a lot of lies. I mean, I actually think he's a compulsive liar.
I think he believes some of it, though. That's my thing. I think they're all very, very strange. I think my thing is I think they're just genuinely quite surprised by how much, how hard it is and how much work it's involved in being in government. And it's a bit of a shock to them. They didn't plan, and actually they're not very good.
Yeah, but they're
just not very good.
No, they're really not. But they said they had a plan. Yeah. Now, if we'd said to them, do you have a plan? And they said, actually, no. We're going to obviously
We're going to wing it.
We're going to wing it. We're going to do it on the run. Because they could have said...
To be fair, Boris Johnson winged everything.
He did.
Even the people who said they've got plans didn't get anything done.
But we sort of knew that he would wing it, I mean, I said that this government, when Dominic Cummings used to say Boris Johnson was like the clattering troll